In the Millionaire's mansion, the arrival of the new nanny transforms an elegant evening into a scene of unexpected tension. Suddenly, the twins, who hadn't spoken in over a year, begin to cry upon seeing her and run towards her as if recognizing something profound. When the children shout "Mommy" in unison, shock ripples through all the guests, and the millionaire's fiancée flies into an absolute rage. And it is in that instant that a secret capable of changing the family's destiny begins to emerge, leaving everyone breathless. The mansion in Kensington Gardens glittered under the golden lights of imported crystal chandeliers. Eleanor adjusted her white apron for the 5th time that night, observing from the entrance of the main hall the movement of the 50 guests who occupied every corner of the Blackwood residence. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the empty tray she had just taken to the kitchen. She shouldn't be here. This wasn't her life, not her world. But she had made a promise, and promises were sacred. The sound of elegant conversations mingled with the grand piano playing softly in the corner of the hall. Women draped in jewels chatted about trips to the continent, while the men discussed business and politics. Eleanor recognized some faces from the media, influential entrepreneurs, prestigious politicians. This was the kind of environment she had known intimately in another life, a life she had abandoned 3 years ago when she fled in the middle of the night, taking only a suitcase and the weight of a secret she could never share. Now, at 27, she lived under the name Eleanor Vance. No one there knew that her real name was Beatrice Covington Rhodes, the sole heiress to one of the country's largest pharmaceutical empires. No one suspected that the young woman of discreet beauty who cared for the Blackwood twins had grown up in mansions even larger than this one, frequented the same social circles as this elite who now saw her as just another employee. Across the hall, Julian Blackwood was talking with a group of investors. Tall, with perfectly combed dark hair and a bespoke suit, the owner of the largest luxury hotel chain across the UK and parts of Europe maintained the impeccable posture that had earned him respect in business circles. But Eleanor knew what that mask hid. In the 3 months she had worked in that house, she had witnessed the silent pain in his eyes whenever he looked at his children, the way he buried himself in work to avoid facing the absence that bled into every room of that mansion. The twins, Leo and Noah, 2 years old, and a silence that haunted everyone in the house. Every night, Eleanor would go up to the nursery decorated with a safari theme, and every night she would find the boys hugging each other, their large, frightened eyes fixed on some distant point only they could see. They hadn't spoken in over a year. The best pediatricians and child psychologists in London had been consulted. Emotional trauma, they said, a reaction to the premature loss of their mother. They needed time, patience, love. Love was something Eleanor had in abundance to offer. Every time she held the boys, every time she sang softly to calm them, every time she dried their silent tears, she felt the weight of the promise she had made. A promise made to a dying woman in a hospital bed, an unlikely friend that life had placed in her path at the darkest moment for them both. Isabella Blackwood, Julian's first wife, the twins' mother, a woman with an easy laugh and a generous heart whom Eleanor had met by pure chance while working the night shift, cleaning hospital corridors under a false identity. How many nights had they talked in that cold hospital room? How many confidences had they exchanged, while Isabella's life slowly slipped through her fingers like fine sand? The sound of high heels on marble pulled Eleanor from her memories. Victoria Davenport crossed the hall with the confidence of someone born into that world. The daughter of an influential member of Parliament, Victoria had the icy beauty of magazine models, with perfectly styled blonde hair, an artificial tan, and a smile that never reached her calculating green eyes. She wore a tight red dress that cost more than Eleanor's annual salary, and carried herself as if she already owned the mansion. She was the fiancée, Julian's new fiancée. This was the night of the official engagement announcement to society. Eleanor's stomach churned. She knew things about Victoria that no one else did. Isabella had spoken of her in her last days, her voice weak but firm as she described the woman who had always envied, her who had always coveted her husband, her social position. Isabella had been afraid afraid that Victoria would eventually get what she wanted, afraid that her babies would grow up under the influence of a cold stepmother who would see them only as obstacles to the money and status she so desperately desired. That's why she had made Ellen a promise. That's why she had shown photos of her to the babies, then only a year old. That's why she had whispered to the little ones in the last days she spent with them in the hospital, before her health completely deteriorated. If Mommy can't be with you, she will take care of you with love. Eleanor didn't know if the twins truly held any memory of those days. They were so small when it all happened. But since she had started working at the mansion 3 months ago, she had noticed something different in the way they looked at her. A silent recognition, a trust they showed no one else. A gentle touch on her shoulder made her turn. Mrs. Evelyn Blackwood, Julian's mother, was watching her with tired but kind eyes. The 68-year-old woman was the only one in the house who seemed to truly see Eleanor, not just as an employee but as a person. "The boys are restless upstairs," Mrs. Blackwood said softly. "Could you check on them? I know it's your night off, but the substitute nanny isn't able to calm them." "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood." Eleanor didn't hesitate. She handed the tray to another staff member and headed towards the main staircase. "Eleanor," Mrs. Blackwood's voice stopped her once more. "Thank you for everything you've done for them." There was something in the older woman's tone, a restrained emotion that Eleanor couldn't quite decipher. She just nodded and went up the stairs, moving away from the party's noise. The second-floor hallway was silent, lined with Persian rugs that muffled the sound of her footsteps. Eleanor passed the family portrait gallery. She stopped involuntarily before one in particular. Isabella was smiling in the photograph, holding the baby twins, one in each arm. The joy in her eyes was palpable, even through the static image. Eleanor felt tears sting. "I'm keeping my promise," she whispered to the photo. "I'm taking care of them." She continued walking until she reached the children's room. Even before opening the door, she could hear the muffled crying. She entered to find Leo and Noah sitting on the rug, tears streaming down their faces, while the substitute nanny tried unsuccessfully to console them with toys. "I'll take it from here," Eleanor said gently. The other woman looked relieved and left quickly. Eleanor knelt before the twins. "Hey, my loves, what happened?" The boys looked at her, and immediately Leo held out his little arms. Noah did the same. She picked them up, one on each side, and began to rock them gently, humming the same lullaby Isabella had asked her to sing. The song Isabella herself used to sing to them. "Sleep, sleep, my little angel, sleep in peace, my love." The sobs began to subside. Eleanor felt the familiar weight of their little heads resting on her shoulders, their small fingers clutching her blouse tightly. Her heart ached. She loved these children as if they were her own. In just 3 months, it had become impossible to imagine her life without them. "Shall we go downstairs for a little bit?" she suggested softly. "Just so you can see that everything's okay, that Daddy is downstairs, and then we'll come back to sleep. How about that?" Leo lifted his head and looked at her with those big, serious eyes, so much like his mother's. He nodded his little head. Noah imitated his brother. Eleanor wiped their faces with a tissue, straightened their clothes, and took one in each hand. "Let's go then, but just for a minute, okay, and then straight to bed." They went down the stairs slowly, the twins holding tightly to her hands. Eleanor planned to just discreetly cross the hallway to the library, where Julian could see them briefly, reassure them, and then she would take them back. But when they reached the entrance to the main hall, something unexpected happened. Julian was standing next to Victoria in the center of the room. She was laughing at something someone had said, her hand possessively on his arm. It was then that Mrs. Blackwood lightly tapped a crystal glass, drawing everyone's attention. "Dear friends," the older woman began with a forced smile, "we would like to make a special announcement tonight." The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to Julian and Victoria. Eleanor stopped where she was, still in the hallway, trying to decide if she should retreat with the boys. But something kept her there. Perhaps the sudden tightening of their little hands in hers, perhaps the tension she felt in the air. Julian cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with all the attention. "Victoria and I would like to officially announce our engagement." Polite applause filled the hall. Victoria displayed her diamond ring like a trophy, her smile triumphant. It was at that exact moment that Leo looked up, saw Eleanor, and something inside him seemed to break, or perhaps awaken. Noah looked too, and in the same fraction of a second, they both began to stir, restless, trying to pull their hands free. Eleanor knelt instinctively, confused by the sudden agitation. "Easy. What is it?" And then it happened. The two boys, who had not uttered a single word in over a year, who had worried doctors and specialists with their prolonged silence, opened their mouths at the same time. "Mommy!" The cry came from both of them simultaneously, loud, clear, desperate. And before Eleanor could process what was happening, before she could move or think or breathe, Leo and Noah let go of her hands and ran. They ran into the hall, past astonished guests, ran, straight across the space that separated the corridor from the center of the room where everyone was gathered, ran with their clumsy but determined little steps, and they threw themselves into Eleanor's arms, hugging her tightly, their faces buried in her neck, repeating the same word they hadn't said in so long. "Mommy! Mommy! Mommy!" The silence that fell over the hall was absolute. 50 pairs of eyes fixed on the scene, the nanny kneeling on the floor, dressed in her simple uniform, embracing the Blackwood twins who were crying and laughing at the same time, clinging to her as if they feared she would disappear. Eleanor lifted her face, and her eyes first met Mrs. Blackwood's, wide with surprise and emotion, then Julian's, completely paralyzed, his expression a mixture of shock and incomprehension, and finally Victoria's. The fiancée was pale under her flawless makeup, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. But what Eleanor saw in her eyes was not confusion or surprise. It was fury, a cold, calculating, dangerous fury. And it was in that moment, embraced by the twins who were shouting "Mommy" at her in front of all of London's high society, that Eleanor knew her life was about to become something far more complicated than she had ever imagined. The promise she had made to Isabella, whispered in a hospital room over a year ago, had just become public in the most dramatic way possible. And the consequences of that revelation, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty, were just beginning. The murmuring started low, like the buzzing of bees, but quickly grew. Eleanor remained kneeling on the floor, the twins still clinging to her, her ears catching fragments of the conversations around her. "What an embarrassing situation," a lady in a navy blue dress muttered to her companion. "These modern nannies have no boundaries," another replied, her tone laden with disapproval. "Making the children call her that. What a lack of respect for the deceased's memory." "Do you think she's trying to seduce the widower?" a man in a grey suit speculated. "Using the children as a strategy is just too low." The words hit Eleanor like stones, but she couldn't defend herself now. All that mattered were Leo and Noah, who were trembling in her arms, frightened by all the sudden attention. She stroked their heads, whispering reassuring words. "It's okay, my loves. It's okay." Julian finally moved, crossing the hall in long strides. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between shock, confusion, and something else Eleanor couldn't identify. He stopped a few feet from her, looking at his sons as if seeing them for the first time in a long while. "Leo, Noah!" His voice came out hoarse. "Come with Daddy." The boys only tightened their hold on Eleanor, hiding their faces in her neck. Leo began to cry softly. Noah followed suit. "They're scared with so many people," Eleanor said gently, meeting Julian's eyes. "Let me take them to their room, please." But before Julian could answer, Victoria approached, her heels clicking far too loudly in the tense silence. She stood beside her fiancé, and Eleanor saw the effort she was making to keep her mask of composure in place. "What an extraordinary situation," Victoria said, her voice melodic but with an undercurrent of steel. "The children are clearly confused. Poor things, so young and already so disturbed." She looked directly at Eleanor, and there was venom in that green gaze. "Perhaps it's time we consider more suitable professional help for them." The message was clear to Eleanor. Victoria wanted her gone. She wanted to eliminate her from that house, from those lives. Mrs. Blackwood emerged from the crowd, her presence bringing a palpable sense of relief. "Eleanor, Take the boys upstairs. They need to calm down." She looked at her son with an expression that brooked no argument. "Julian, let her do her job. You can discuss this after our guests have left." Julian hesitated, but then gave a brief nod. Eleanor seized the opening, rising with difficulty, a boy in each arm. They were heavy, but she held them firmly against her body. Crossing the hall was like walking through a minefield. All eyes were on her. Some curious, others judgmental, some even amused by the scandal. Eleanor kept her head held high, focusing only on reaching the stairs. "Absurd," she heard someone mutter. "What a disgrace for the Blackwood family," said another. When she finally reached the second floor, her legs were trembling. She entered the children's room and closed the door, leaning against it for a moment, trying to catch her breath and regain her composure. Leo and Noah were still clinging to her, but their crying had stopped. She carried them to the bed, sitting down with them, in her lap. "You're talking again," Eleanor said, her voice breaking with emotion. "After so long, you're talking again." Leo lifted his little face, his brown eyes too serious for a 2-year-old. "Mommy," he said again, softer this time, as if testing the word. "Mommy," Noah repeated, touching Eleanor's face with his small hand. Tears streamed freely down Eleanor's face. How could she explain to 2 small children that she wasn't their biological mother? How could she make them understand that the woman who had given birth to them, who had loved them more than life itself, was no longer there? "I love you both so much," was all she could manage to say. So much. She stayed with them until they fell asleep, singing softly, stroking their hair. When she finally tucked them into their beds, it was past midnight. The sounds of the party had ceased some time ago. The mansion was quiet. Eleanor knew she had to go downstairs, that an inevitable conversation was waiting for her. But her feet didn't want to move. She sat in the armchair beside the twins' beds, watching them sleep, and for the first time in 3 years she allowed herself to question her choices. Fleeing her arranged marriage had been necessary. Marcus Thorne, her ex-fiancé, was a violent, controlling man who treated her like property. The last time she'd seen him, he had left purple marks on her arms from grabbing her so forcefully, shouting that she was his and always would be. Her family, powerful and influential in the pharmaceutical industry, had arranged the marriage thinking only of business alliances, completely ignoring the signs of abuse. Eleanor had fled at the first opportunity, taking only the essentials and leaving behind everything she knew. For the past 3 years, she had lived in hiding, working menial jobs under a false identity, always looking over her shoulder, always afraid of being found. Meeting Isabella at the hospital had been a twist of fate. Or maybe not. Maybe it was the universe conspiring to put 2 lost souls in each other's path exactly when they needed it most. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Eleanor stood up quickly, opening the door carefully so as not to wake the boys. Mrs. Blackwood stood on the other side, holding 2 cups of tea. "I thought you might need this," the older woman said kindly. Eleanor accepted the cup with gratitude. "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. Come, let's talk in the sitting room down the hall. Leave the door ajar so you can hear if they wake up." Eleanor followed her to the small family sitting room, decorated with comfortable furniture and shelves filled with books. They sat in armchairs opposite each other. "You knew," Eleanor said after a moment. It wasn't a question. Mrs. Blackwood took a sip of her tea before answering. "I suspected. Isabella made me promise to find you if we ever needed someone to care for the children. She gave me your real name, Beatrice, and a description, but she also told me you would likely be using another name, hiding for reasons she couldn't reveal, but that were legitimate." Eleanor's heart quickened. "She told you?" "Not the details, only that you were someone to be trusted, that you had shown her kindness in her most difficult moments, and that you would love and protect my grandchildren as if they were your own." Mrs. Blackwood paused, her eyes welling up. "When I posted that job advertisement 3 months ago, I used specific words, Isabella. Told me you would recognize. I knew that if you were still in London, if you were still in a position to help, you would come." "And I came," Eleanor whispered, "because I promised her, because she asked me to look after them if something happened." "Isabella was special," Mrs. Blackwood said, wiping away a tear. She was the daughter I never had. Seeing my son with her, seeing how happy they were, seeing the twins born, it was the happiest time of my life. The woman's voice hardened, and then she got sick. Those postpartum complications that no one foresaw that developed months later. It was like watching her fade away slowly, day by day. Eleanor set her cup aside and took the older woman's hand. She was my friend. In just 3 weeks, she became one of the most important people in my life. And when she asked me to take care of Leo and Noah if she couldn't, I promised. I promised from the bottom of my heart. I know, my dear, I know. Mrs. Blackwood squeezed her hand. But now we have a problem. What happened downstairs won't simply disappear. Victoria is furious, I saw it. In her eyes. She will do everything to get you out of here. I know, Eleanor admitted, but I can't leave Leo and Noah now. Not when they've just started talking again, when they're finally starting to heal. My son will want explanations. He has the right to know why his children called you Mommy, why you're really here. Eleanor closed her eyes, the weight of the truth heavy on her shoulders. I know. I'm ready to tell him. But Mrs. Blackwood, there are things about me, about my past, that are dangerous. If my true identity is discovered, there is someone who will come for me, someone violent and powerful. Mrs. Blackwood's expression grew serious. The man you ran from? Eleanor nodded. He has connections, investigators. He's been offering rewards for information on my whereabouts. If he finds out where I am, then we will be careful, Mrs. Blackwood said firmly. But we can't keep this a secret forever, Eleanor. Or Beatrice. Whoever you are, those children recognized you. They need you. And maybe you need them too. The two women sat in silence for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of the London night through the open windows. Julian went down to see off the last of the guests, Mrs. Blackwood said finally. Victoria left with her parents, but she pulled me aside first. She said that Nanny was clearly an opportunist, that she was manipulating the children, that I should insist my son fire her immediately. Eleanor wasn't surprised. And what did you say? A small, sad smile appeared on the older woman's face. I said my son was old enough to make his own decisions about the staff in his house. But Eleanor, I need you to understand. Victoria won't give up easily. She pursued Julian for years, even before he married Isabella. She always wanted him, always envied what Isabella had. Now that she's finally achieved her goal, she won't let anything stand in her way. She doesn't really care about him, does she? Eleanor asked, though she already knew the answer. Isabella had told her. Victoria cares about power, status and money, Mrs. Blackwood replied bitterly. Julian is just a means to those ends, and the twins in her view are obstacles. I've seen how she looks at them, as if they're inconveniences that need to be managed. Eleanor felt anger burn in her chest. Isabella was right then. She feared this exact thing, that Victoria would eventually enter Julian's life and treat her children like burdens. Isabella was always perceptive, Mrs. Blackwood said sadly. She knew Victoria was lurking, waiting for her chance. That's why she made those plans, why she found you. Footsteps in the hall made both women fall silent. Julian appeared at the doorway, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, his expression exhausted. Mother, he said, and then his eyes found Eleanor. We need to talk. Eleanor stood, her legs trembling, but her determination firm. Yes, sir, we do. Mrs. Blackwood also rose. I'll check on the boys. You two talk. But Julian, she looked at her son with intensity, really listen to her, without premature judgments, without letting others' opinions cloud your reasoning. Just listen. Julian frowned, confused but nodded. Mrs. Blackwood left, leaving Eleanor and Julian alone in the room. The silence that settled was heavy. Julian watched her, and Eleanor could see the questions piling up behind those dark eyes. Finally he spoke. Why did my sons call you Mommy? The question was simple, direct, but the answer was anything but. Eleanor took a deep breath, preparing to begin unraveling the threads of a story that would change everything. Because your wife Isabella asked me to take care of them, and before she passed away, she showed my picture to the babies. She told them I was someone they could trust, Someone who would love them if she couldn't be there. Eleanor paused, seeing Julian's expression shift from confusion to shock. "Sir, I knew your wife, in the last days of her life, and she made me a promise that I am trying to keep." Julian staggered slightly, leaning on the back of the armchair. His face had lost all colour. "You knew Isabella?" His voice was almost a whisper. "When? How?" And Eleanor knew there was no turning back. The truth, as complicated and dangerous as it was, had to be revealed. "A year and a half ago, I was working nights at a hospital, and that's where our paths crossed." The 3 days following the party were the most tense Eleanor had experienced since she started working at the Blackwood mansion. Julian hadn't demanded detailed explanations that night. After hearing she had met Isabella at the hospital, he had simply left the room, his face pale, muttering that he needed to process that information. Since then, he had barely looked at her. The twins, however, were transformed. After more than a year of silence, they now wouldn't stop talking. Simple words, still clumsy from lack of practice, but words nonetheless. Leo pointed at everything, asking, "What's that?" Noah repeated words he heard, testing his voice like a newly discovered instrument. And they both followed Eleanor everywhere, constantly calling for her. "Mommy, look! Mommy, come! Mommy, stay!" Every time they said that word, Eleanor felt her heart clench. Love and guilt mixed in equal measure. She wasn't their mother, not biologically, but she had made a promise to the one who was, and that promise had become the center of her existence. It was Tuesday morning when Victoria showed up unannounced. Eleanor was in the garden with the twins, reading a storybook under the shade of a flowering cherry tree. She heard the high heels before she saw her, that unmistakable sound of power and determination. "What a lovely scene," Victoria said, her voice as sweet as poisoned honey. She wore an impeccable white dress, oversized sunglasses, and a designer bag hung from her arm. The devoted nanny and the children. Eleanor stood up, instinctively positioning herself between Victoria and the boys. "Good morning, Miss Davenport. No need for formalities, Eleanor. Or should I call you something else?" Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "After all, it seems you're more than just a simple nanny to this family." "I am just the children's caregiver," Eleanor replied calmly, though her heart was pounding. Of course. Victoria came closer, ignoring the response. She knelt in front of Leo and Noah, her smile widening. "Hello, little ones. Remember me? I'm Victoria, your new mommy." Leo immediately hid behind Eleanor. Noah made a face and turned away. Victoria's expression hardened for a fraction of a second before returning to her mask of sympathy. "Shy. How cute." She stood up, dusting off her hands as if she had touched something dirty. "Eleanor, we need to talk alone." "I can't leave the children alone," Eleanor said. "Oh, but I insist." Victoria gestured to someone behind Eleanor. A middle-aged, uniformed woman approached. "I brought Susan. She was nanny to Senator Martin's children for 10 years. Impeccable credentials. She can stay with the boys while we talk." Eleanor didn't want to leave Leo and Noah, but she also knew she couldn't create a scene. She knelt at the twins' level. "I'll be right back, okay? Auntie Susan will stay with you. Mommy will be back soon." "Don't go." Leo clung to her blouse, his eyes wide with fear. "Stay." Noah started to cry. Hey, look at me." Eleanor held their faces gently. "I promise I'll be back. Pinky, promise. Remember?" She held out her little fingers. The boys, still reluctant, intertwined their pinkies with hers. With a heavy heart, Eleanor handed them over to Susan, who at least seemed genuinely kind. She followed Victoria to the mansion's formal living room, the one used only for important guests. As soon as the door closed, Victoria shed all pretense of civility. She dropped her bag on the sofa and faced Eleanor coldly. "Let's be direct, you and I. I don't know what little game you're trying to play, but it's not going to work." "I'm not playing any game," Eleanor replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'm just taking care of Leo and Noah." "Oh, are you?" Victoria paced the room, her fingers gliding over the expensive furniture. So it's pure coincidence that traumatized children suddenly start talking again and decide to call you of all people, Mommy. On the night I announced my engagement to their father, in front of 50 people from high society. I didn't plan that, Eleanor said, feeling anger begin to boil. I would never ask them to call me that. But you don't correct them either, do you? Victoria turned abruptly. You let them continue. You allow this unhealthy attachment to grow. And why? Because you saw an opportunity. You saw a rich, vulnerable widower with 2 needy children. You thought you could use those children to get into this family. You know nothing about me or my intentions, Eleanor said, trying to control her voice. Don't I? Victoria moved closer, her green eyes glinting with something dangerous. Then enlighten me. Tell me this fascinating story of how you met Isabella. How did a simple nanny from a humble background, I presume, meet the wife of one of London's wealthiest men before she passed away? Eleanor hesitated. How much should she reveal? How much was safe? I worked at the hospital where she was a patient, she said carefully. We met there. We developed a friendship. How convenient. Victoria crossed her arms. And she, on her sickbed, decided you would be the perfect person to care for her children, a stranger she met over a few days. It was 3 weeks, and yes, we became close. Victoria laughed, a humorless sound. Do you really expect me to believe that, for Julian to believe that? Such a fantastical, convenient story? It's the truth, Eleanor held her gaze. And Mrs. Blackwood can confirm it. Isabella asked her to find me if they ever needed help with the children. The mention of Mrs. Blackwood made Victoria pause. Eleanor saw the calculation behind those cold eyes. If Julian's mother was involved, the situation was more complicated than Victoria had anticipated. Mrs. Blackwood is an elderly, sentimental woman still grieving for her daughter-in-law, Victoria said finally. Forgive me if I don't take her judgment as definitive. Julian is the one who matters, and I can assure you he will start asking the right questions. Questions you will plant in his head, Eleanor said. Me? Victoria placed a hand on her chest in feigned indignation. I will simply help him see the situation clearly. A mysterious nanny who appears out of nowhere, gains the trust of vulnerable children, creates this fantasy that she's some kind of mother figure. Any rational person would question her motives. My motives are to care for Leo and Noah. Nothing more. So you have no interest in their father? Victoria tilted her head. You haven't felt any sort of attraction to the handsome, wealthy widower you work for? Never imagined what it would be like to become the new lady of this mansion? Eleanor felt her blood boil. I have never thought of Julian that way. He is my employer. I respect his grief and his family. How noble, Victoria said sarcastically. But you see, Eleanor, even if your intentions are as pure as you claim, the result is the same. You are getting in the way. I am building a relationship with Julian. I am preparing to become part of this family, and I don't need a nanny whom the children confuse with their dead mother complicating things. So that's it? Eleanor took a step forward. You want me to leave so you can have Julian all to yourself, without inconvenient reminders of Isabella? I want, Victoria said slowly, for you to understand your place. You are an employee. Employees can be replaced. Not by you, Eleanor retorted. You have no authority over the staff in this house. Not yet, but I will. As soon as Julian and I are married, I will be the lady of this house, and one of my first actions will be to ensure the children have appropriate caregivers, professionals with proper credentials who understand boundaries. Eleanor took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. The twins just started talking again after more than a year. They are beginning to heal. Any abrupt change now would be detrimental. Or perhaps, Victoria said, they are healing in spite of you, not because of you. Maybe it's time to bring in real professionals. The door opened before Eleanor could reply. Julian entered, stopping short when he saw the 2 women facing off. Victoria, I didn't know you were here. Darling. Victoria transformed instantly, her face lighting up with a warm smile. She crossed the room and kissed Julian on the cheek. I stopped by to see how you were. I know the last few days have been difficult. Julian glanced briefly at Eleanor before turning his attention back to his fiancée. I'm fine, just processing everything." "It's understandable." Victoria took his hand. "And that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about the situation with the children and the nanny." Eleanor saw Julian stiffen slightly. "Victoria, we've already talked about this." I know, but love, you need to consider all the implications. People are talking. The party was a social disaster. Everyone is wondering what exactly is happening in this house." "I don't care what people think," Julian said, but Eleanor heard the uncertainty in his voice. "But you should," Victoria insisted gently. "Your reputation, your business, your children, all of it is affected by perception. And right now the perception is that there's something inappropriate happening. A nanny the children call Mommy, who apparently had some secret connection to Isabella." "It wasn't a secret." Eleanor couldn't stop herself. "Isabella and I were friends. She asked me to take care of her children. There's nothing inappropriate about that." Julian finally looked at her directly. "Then why didn't you tell me this when you were hired? Why hide it?" Eleanor opened her mouth, but the words didn't come easily. How could she explain that revealing her connection to Isabella would mean explaining why she was at the hospital, which in turn would lead to questions about her true identity? She began, but Victoria cut her off. "See, even she can't give a clear explanation. Julian, darling, I know this is hard, but you have to think of the children's well-being. They are clearly confused. Calling a nanny Mommy is not healthy. They need professional help, qualified therapists, not an employee who is perpetuating this confusion." Julian ran a hand through his hair, the familiar gesture of stress. "Leo and Noah are talking again. After more than a year of silence, they are talking again. And that's wonderful," Victoria said quickly. "But we don't know if it was because of her or in spite of her. Maybe it was just the right time. Maybe they were ready. Or maybe," a voice said from the door, "it was because Eleanor gave them exactly what they needed. Unconditional love." Mrs. Blackwood entered the room, leaning on her elegant cane. Her gaze swept over the three occupants before settling on Julian. "Son, I need to speak with you. Alone." She looked at Victoria. "My dear, I'm sure you have other engagements." Victoria opened her mouth to protest, but Mrs. Blackwood's look was not one to be argued with. With a forced smile, she picked up her bag. "Of course. Julian, I'll call you later." She kissed him quickly and then paused beside Eleanor. "Think about what we discussed," she whispered, low enough for only Eleanor to hear. "You don't belong in this world. You never will." When Victoria had left, the silence in the room was suffocating. Mrs. Blackwood sat down heavily in an armchair, and Eleanor noticed for the first time how tired the older woman looked. "Eleanor, go check on the children," Mrs. Blackwood said. "Send Susan away, please, and then come back here. It's time for you to tell the whole story, to me and to Julian." Eleanor nodded, relieved to escape the tense atmosphere, but also terrified of what was to come. She found the twins in the garden, and Susan seemed happy to be dismissed. "Mommy!" Leo ran to her as soon as he saw her. "Mommy's back!" Noah jumped for joy. Eleanor hugged them tightly, breathing in the scent of baby soap and grass. "I always come back for you. Always." But as she led them back into the mansion, towards the conversation that would change everything, Eleanor wondered if she would be able to keep that promise. Because Victoria wasn't bluffing. She truly intended to get her out of there, to separate Eleanor from the children she had grown to love as her own, and the truth she was about to reveal could give Victoria the exact ammunition she needed. 2 hours later, Eleanor sat in the living room again, but this time with Leo and Noah playing quietly on the rug at her feet. Mrs. Blackwood had insisted the children be present, saying they were part of the story. Julian sat opposite her, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. He hadn't taken a single sip. He just looked at Eleanor with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Expectation, perhaps, or fear of what he was about to hear. "Before I begin," Eleanor said, her voice slightly shaky, "I need you to understand that parts of my story are dangerous. I'm not being dramatic. There is someone looking for me, someone who would harm me if they found me." Julian frowned. "Someone is threatening you?" Not currently, but only because they don't. Know where I am. Eleanor took a deep breath. My real name is not Eleanor Vance. It's Beatrice Covington Rhodes. The name hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Julian stared at her, processing it slowly. Covington Rhodes, he repeated, as in Covington Rhodes Pharmaceuticals. Yes, Eleanor, or rather Beatrice, confirmed. I am the only daughter of Edward Covington Rhodes, the heiress to everything. Or at least I was, until I ran away 3 years ago. Julian leaned back in his chair, clearly shocked. Why would the heiress to a £1 billion fortune be working as a nanny? Because the alternative was marrying a man who abused me. The words came out harsher than she intended. My father, at the time, was desperate to secure a merger between our company and Thorne Biologics. The solution? An arranged marriage between me and Marcus Thorne, the CEO's son. Beatrice saw Julian's hands tighten on his cup. Mrs. Blackwood just listened in silence, though Beatrice suspected the older woman already knew some of this. Marcus seemed perfect on paper, Beatrice continued, handsome, polite, from a good family. But behind closed doors he was someone else, controlling, possessive, violent. It started with small things, constant criticism, of my appearance, my intelligence, my choices. Then it escalated to grabbing my arm too tightly, squeezing my wrist until it bruised, pushing me against walls. "Did you tell your father?" Julian asked, his voice tense. I tried, but he was blinded by the business opportunity. He said I was exaggerating, that Marcus was just being protective, that all marriages go through adjustments. The Thorne family was too important. The merger was worth billions. Beatrice felt bitterness rise in her throat. So I realized I was alone. That if I married Marcus, he would have legal control over me, over my life, over everything. "That's why you ran," Mrs. Blackwood said softly. "The night before the wedding, I took basic documents, some cash I managed to withdraw without raising suspicion, and I disappeared. I bought a fake identity, changed my appearance, started working jobs that paid in cash." Beatrice looked down at the twins playing at her feet. "I've spent the last 3 years being invisible. I've worked as a waitress, a cleaner, a nanny in other homes. Anything to survive without being found." "And Marcus?" Julian asked. "Did he look for you?" "Obsessively. He doesn't accept rejection, doesn't understand, that he doesn't own me. He's offered rewards, hired investigators, mobilized his network of contacts. To him, I'm property that ran away." Beatrice felt a shiver. "If he finds me, I don't know what he's capable of." Julian was pale. "And your father? Does he know where you are?" Beatrice shook her head. "No, and that breaks my heart. He's ill, I'm sure of it. Before I left, I noticed signs: weight loss, extreme fatigue. I suspect it's something serious, but I can't contact him without risking Marcus finding out." A heavy silence fell over the room. Leo looked up, sensing the tension, and moved closer to Beatrice. She automatically pulled him into her lap. "Did Isabella know this?" Julian finally asked. "Did she know who you were?" "Not at first. She knew me as Eleanor, the night shift cleaner who cleaned her hospital corridor." Beatrice stroked Leo's hair absently. "It was a 1.5 years ago. She was hospitalized with complications that had developed months after the twins' birth. Serious complications that the doctors couldn't fully control." Julian closed his eyes, pain etched on every line of his face. Beatrice knew he was revisiting that terrible time when Isabella fought for her life while the doctors tried everything. "I worked from 11 at night to 7 in the morning," Beatrice continued. "Isabella rarely slept. The pain, the anxiety, missing the babies she could only see during limited visits. We started talking. Small talk at first, then longer, deeper conversations." "And you told her the truth?" Mrs. Blackwood asked. "Not immediately, but Isabella was perceptive. She noticed things about me, the way I spoke, cultural references, knowledge a common cleaner probably wouldn't have. One night she just asked, 'Who are you really, Eleanor?' And I couldn't lie to her. Not to someone who was clearly nearing the end." Tears began to fall down Beatrice's face, but she didn't wipe them away. I told her everything, my real identity, Marcus, my escape. I expected judgment, or for her to report me. But Isabella just took my hand and said, "You were very brave, and I know exactly how it feels to be trapped in situations other people chose for you." Julian stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back rigid. Beatrice could see he was struggling to maintain his composure. "That's when we truly became friends," Beatrice said, to his back. "She started telling me about her life, her fears, her hopes, and her biggest fears were about you." Beatrice looked at Leo and Noah. Isabella knew her time was running out. The doctors had been honest with her, and she was so afraid of what would happen to her babies. "I was taking care of them," Julian said, his voice hoarse. "I would never have abandoned them." She knew that, but she was afraid of something else, of Victoria. Julian turned sharply. "What?" "Isabella told me about Victoria, how she had always been interested in you since before your marriage, how she had befriended Isabella just to be close to you, how Isabella noticed the jealousy, the envy." Beatrice chose her words carefully. "Isabella feared that if something happened to her, Victoria would eventually get what she always wanted, and she feared her children would grow up under the influence of a stepmother who wouldn't genuinely love them." "That's absurd," Julian began, but Mrs. Blackwood interrupted him. "It's true, Julian. Isabella told me the same things. I didn't want to believe it at the time. I thought it was delusions from the illness or the medication. But she was right about Victoria. She always was." Julian looked devastated. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because you were grieving," Mrs. Blackwood replied. "Because you were buried in work, trying not to fall apart. Because I wasn't sure if Isabella was right, or if it was just the fears of a dying woman." The older woman paused. "But after seeing how Victoria acted at the party, how she tried to manipulate you against Eleanor today, I know Isabella saw what the rest of us didn't want to see," Beatrice continued, her voice firmer now. "In the last weeks of Isabella's life, she formed a plan. She said if she couldn't be here to protect the boys, she needed to ensure someone could, someone who would genuinely love them." "You," Julian said, looking at her. "She made me promise that if you ever needed help with the children, I would come. She said she would ask Mrs. Blackwood to find me when the time came." Beatrice wiped her tears. "And she did more. The last few times she was able to see the babies in the hospital, she brought me with her. She would show them my picture, hold my hand. While she rocked them, tell them I was good, that it was safe to love me." Julian approached slowly, kneeling in front of Beatrice and looking at his sons. Leo and Noah watched their father with their big, serious eyes. "She was preparing you," Julian whispered, his voice breaking. "She was making you recognize her." "If Mommy can't be with you, she will take care of you with love," Beatrice quoted, repeating Isabella's exact words. That's what she told them, over and over again. "That's why they called me Mommy at the party," Beatrice continued. "Not because I manipulated or confused them, but because on some deep level of their infant memories, they recognized the woman their mother had identified as a protector, the woman she had personally chosen to love them if she couldn't." Noah stood up and walked to his father, touching his face with a small hand. "Daddy," crying. It was the first time he had spoken directly to Julian since he had started talking again. Julian pulled his son into a tight hug, and Leo soon joined them. The three of them stayed there, embracing as years of silent pain finally found release. Beatrice stood up, discreetly giving them space, but Julian's hand caught her by the wrist. "Don't go," he said, his voice choked. "Please." She stayed, and when Julian pulled her into the embrace with the boys, Beatrice let the tears run free. There, in that moment, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she had managed to keep her promise to Isabella. Mrs. Blackwood watched it all with tears in her eyes, a handkerchief pressed to her lips. But outside the window, hidden behind the curtains of another room, a figure observed the scene. Victoria had returned unannounced, intending to retrieve some documents she had forgotten. But what she saw through the living room window filled her with a rage so intense that her nails dug into the palms of her hands. Julian hugging that nanny, the children between them as if they were a happy family. Mrs. Blackwood watching benevolently, clearly approving of it all. No, this could not happen. She had worked too many years, waited too long, invested too much effort to win Julian. She was not going to let some nobody nanny, no matter what dramatic story she had, steal it all away from her. Victoria left the mansion silently, her mind already spinning with plans. If Eleanor Vance or Beatrice Covington Rhodes or whoever she was thought she had won, she was sorely mistaken. Because Victoria knew exactly how to use that information. A runaway heiress, hiding under a false identity, with a violent fiancé looking for her. There was so much potential there, so many ways to turn this to her advantage. She just needed to be clever, patient, calculating. And Victoria Davenport was all of those things and more. The following days brought a subtle but significant shift in the dynamics of the Blackwood mansion. Julian, who had previously avoided Beatrice, now sought her out for conversations about the twins. He asked about their routine, their preferences, their fears, things a father should know, but that grief and overwork had prevented him from discovering. "Noah doesn't like total darkness," Beatrice told him one morning, as they had coffee together in the kitchen, the boys still asleep. "He needs a nightlight. And Leo has nightmares sometimes, always the same one. He dreams he's looking for someone but can't find them." Julian absorbed every piece of information as if it were a precious treasure. "I didn't know. I should know. These things about my own sons." "You were surviving," Beatrice said gently. "Sometimes that's all we can do." But if things were improving inside the mansion, the outside world was becoming more complicated. Victoria had changed tactics. No longer did she confront Beatrice directly or openly pressure Julian. Instead, she began a quiet, calculated campaign. It started with small things. A casual comment during a social dinner about how traumatized children sometimes develop inappropriate attachments. A seemingly concerned conversation with influential friends about the challenges of raising stepchildren. Articles strategically left on Julian's desk about the dangers of employees who cross professional boundaries. Beatrice felt the web being woven around her, but she didn't know exactly how to fight it. Victoria was too smart to leave obvious traces of manipulation. It was on Thursday, a week after the revelation, that things began to unravel. Beatrice was at the supermarket with the twins, buying ingredients for their favorite dinner. Leo and Noah loved to help, putting items in the trolley, laughing when Beatrice pretended not to find something that was right in front of them. "Mummy, there!" Leo pointed to a box of biscuits on the high shelf. Beatrice was reaching for it when she felt someone watching her. That old familiar feeling, the prickle on the back of her neck she had developed during her 3 years on the run. She turned quickly, scanning the aisle. A man in a dark suit was at the other end, pretending to examine products, but his eyes were fixed on her. When he realized she had noticed him, he smiled slightly and nodded before turning and disappearing down another aisle. Beatrice's heart hammered. She knew that look, that posture. Private investigator. She had seen several of them in the first few months, after her escape, before she had learned to be truly invisible. "Mummy, okay?" Noah tugged at her blouse, concerned. Beatrice forced a smile. "Everything's fine, love. Let's just finish our shopping quickly, okay?" She paid rapidly and practically ran to the car, constantly checking if she was being followed. By the time she reached the mansion, she was trembling. Mrs. Blackwood met her in the entrance hall, immediately noticing something was wrong. "What happened?" "I think I was recognized," Beatrice whispered, trying to keep her voice calm for the boys. "At the supermarket. There was a man he looked like a private investigator." Mrs. Blackwood's expression hardened. "Go with the children to their room. I'll inform Julian, and I'll call our head of security." Over the next few hours, the mansion transformed into a fortress. Julian came home early from the office, bringing with him a personal security expert. Beatrice had to tell her entire story again, this time including detailed descriptions of Marcus and his known associates. "If he's found out where you are," said the expert, a serious man named Mark, "he'll act fast. Men like him don't like to wait." "But how did he find out?" Beatrice wondered aloud. "I was so careful. I completely changed my appearance. I only use cash to avoid an electronic trail. I never go to the same places." The party, Mrs. Blackwood said suddenly. 50 guests saw you that night. Photographs were taken. If one of those photos fell into the wrong hands, Beatrice felt her stomach sink. The party. Of course. She'd been so careful for 3 years, and one night in front of high society had ruined everything. Who could have shared the photos? Julian asked, clearly trying to solve the problem. Any of the guests, Mrs. Blackwood replied. But it would have to be someone with a reason to investigate Beatrice specifically, someone who wanted to find out more about her. Everyone's eyes turned to the obvious conclusion at the same moment. Victoria, Julian said, his voice low and dangerous. As if summoned by the name, Julian's phone rang. It was her. Darling, can we talk? I need to tell you something important about your nanny. Victoria's voice was sweet over the speakerphone, but Beatrice detected the underlying triumph. I'm busy right now, Victoria. I'm sure you'll want to hear this. It's about Eleanor's true identity, or should I call her Beatrice Covington Rhodes? The silence in the room was absolute. Julian looked at Beatrice with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Anger not directed at her, but at the situation. I already know who she is, Julian said coldly. Beatrice told me everything. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Clearly this was not the reaction Victoria had expected. Oh, well then you also know she has a fiancé looking for her, Marcus Thorne. He's been asking questions, Julian, offering rewards for information on her whereabouts. And you helped him, Julian stated. It wasn't a question. You led him to Beatrice. I simply shared information I thought he had a right to know. After all, they were engaged. They have a legal commitment between their families. A commitment she broke because he was abusive. Julian was visibly controlling his rage. You knew that, and you still led him to her. I don't know about any abuse, Victoria said, her voice hardening. I only know that a woman ran away from her responsibilities and is hiding under a false identity, which, I might remind you, is illegal. Beatrice felt the world spin. Victoria had actually done it. She had given her location to Marcus. After 3 years of safety, of relative peace, everything was falling apart. Our engagement is off, Julian said, his voice icy. I don't want to see you again. Do not come near me or my family again. Julian, you're making a huge mistake. You're letting a fugitive manipulate you. She's using your children to... Julian hung up the phone mid-sentence. For a long moment, no one spoke. We need a plan, Mark said finally. If this Marcus Thorne is as dangerous as you say, he's coming, and soon. I can leave, Beatrice said, her voice trembling. I can disappear again. I won't put this family in danger because of me. No, Julian said firmly, surprising everyone. You're not going anywhere. My sons just started talking again, just started to heal. I will not let them be traumatized again by losing someone they love. But Marcus... We will deal with Marcus, Julian said. Legally, properly, but we will deal with him. He turned to Mark. I want reinforced security at the mansion, additional cameras, and I want the best lawyers in London. We're getting a restraining order. On what grounds? Beatrice asked. I have no concrete proof of the abuse. He was always careful, and technically there is still a marriage contract between our families. Then we'll get proof, Mrs. Blackwood said with determination. Men like Marcus always have skeletons in their closets, always. But even as they made plans, even as Julian mobilized resources, Beatrice felt the fear growing. She knew Marcus. She knew his obsession, his need for control. He wasn't just going to accept a restraining order. He wasn't going to leave her alone. That night, after putting the twins to bed, Beatrice stayed awake, staring out the window. The garden was illuminated by newly installed security lights. Guards patrolled the perimeter. Cameras watched every angle. But Beatrice knew that no amount of security would be enough if Marcus really wanted to get to her. A soft knock on the door made her turn. Julian came in, carrying 2 cups of tea. I thought you might be awake, he said, offering her a cup. I can't stop thinking, Beatrice admitted, about how I've put you all in danger. You did no such thing, Julian sat beside her. Victoria did. She's the one who revealed your location. She's the one who put us all at risk out of sheer vengeance. But if I wasn't here... If you weren't here, my sons would still be silent. They would still be traumatized and scared. Julian looked at her intensely. Eleanor, Beatrice, whoever you are, you saved my boys. I'm not going to abandon you now that you need help. Beatrice felt tears burn. Why are you doing this? I'm just your employee. You're not, Julian said softly. You haven't been just an employee since the moment my sons ran into your arms calling you mommy. Since I found out my wife personally chose you to protect them. You are part of this family, whether you like it or not. The words hung between them, laden with meanings neither of them was ready to fully explore. Julian, there's something you need to know, Beatrice said after a moment. About my father. He's ill, I know he is. Before I left, I saw the signs, and it's killing me that I can't be with him, can't help him. Where is he now? I'm not sure. Probably still in Edinburgh, where the company headquarters are, but I can't look for him. If I do, Marcus will know immediately. Julian was silent for a moment, thoughtful. What if I sent someone to investigate, discreetly, just to find out how he is if he needs help? Beatrice looked at him, surprised. You would do that? Beatrice, you've spent the last few months caring for my children. The least I can do is help you find out about your father. For the first time in days, Beatrice felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could work out. Maybe she could reclaim not just her freedom but her family as well. But that hope was brutally crushed the next morning when Mark ran into the house, his face pale. He's here. Marcus Thorne just came through the main gate with documents claiming legal rights over Beatrice, and he brought lawyers and the authorities. The nightmare Beatrice had feared for 3 years had finally caught up with her. Beatrice was in the dining room with the twins when she heard the sound of raised voices coming from the entrance hall. Her blood ran cold. She would recognize that voice anywhere, even after 3 years. Deep, authoritative, with a tone of ownership that had always made her shrink. Marcus Thorne was here in the mansion, meters away from her. Leo, Noah, come with me, she said as calmly as possible, though her hands were shaking. Let's go play upstairs. But Mommy, I want to finish my juice, Leo complained. Later, love, we need to go up now. But before she could reach the door, Julian entered quickly. Stay here. Let me handle this. Julian, you don't understand. I know exactly who he is, Julian interrupted, his voice firm. And he is not getting near you while I'm here. Beatrice held the twins against her, her heart pounding so hard she was sure they could hear it. Julian left, closing the door behind him, but she could still hear the voices. Mr. Thorne, Julian's voice was controlled but ice-cold. This is private property. You were not invited. I don't need an invitation. Marcus's voice was just as Beatrice remembered, arrogant and dismissive. I've come for my fiancée, Beatrice Covington Rhodes. I know she's here. The lady who works in this house is not your fiancée, and she is not your property. We have a valid marriage contract between our families, said another voice, likely one of the lawyers. And she fled her legal obligations. Furthermore, she is using false documents, which is a crime. A marriage contract she had every right to break, considering the abuse she suffered, Julian retorted. And any court will agree with that once we present the evidence. Marcus laughed, a humorless sound. Evidence? There is no evidence because there was no abuse. Beatrice has always been dramatic, making up stories to shirk her responsibilities. Beatrice hugged the boys tighter. How could he lie so easily? How could he deny the marks he'd left on her arms, the cruel words he'd whispered in, her ear the shoves and grips that threatened to escalate into something worse? Mr. Thorne, said Mark, the head of security, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, now, or I will call the police. Go ahead and call them, Marcus said confidently. I have full documentation. The police will support me. Beatrice has committed crimes by using a false identity, by fleeing a legal commitment. I have every right to be here. Beatrice heard footsteps approaching the dining room door. Her entire body froze. Not now, not in front of the children, but it was Mrs. Blackwood, who opened the door, not Marcus. The older woman entered quickly and locked the door behind her. Beatrice, take the children and go to the safe room, now. Safe room? Julian had one installed yesterday, on the 3rd floor, behind the wardrobe in his private study. Mark will show you the way. Mrs. Blackwood took out her phone. I'm calling the lawyers Julian hired. They'll be here in 15 minutes. A loud bang on the door made them jump. Beatrice! Marcus's voice cut through the wood. I know you're in there. Stop being a coward and come talk to me. Leo started to cry, frightened. Noah clung to Beatrice's neck. Mrs. Blackwood positioned herself between the door and Beatrice, small but fierce in her protection. Go, she whispered. Now. Beatrice left through the back door of the dining room, the one that led to the kitchen and then the service stairs. Mark was waiting, and he silently guided them through the maze of corridors to the third floor. The safe room was exactly what its name suggested. Hidden behind a revolving panel in Julian's study wardrobe, it was a small but comfortable space with reinforced walls, a communication system, and emergency supplies. Stay here, Mark instructed. No one but the family and I knows about this place. You'll be safe. When he left, Beatrice finally allowed her knees to give way. She sat on the floor, still holding the twins, and let the tears fall. Mommy crying? Noah asked, touching her wet face. Mommy's scared, love, Beatrice admitted. There was no point in lying to them. But we're safe here. Daddy will take care of everything. Bad man? Leo asked with his childlike wisdom. Yes, my love. The man downstairs is not good, but he won't hurt us, I promise. She hoped she could keep that promise. Through the room's audio system, Beatrice could hear what was happening downstairs. The argument had heated up. I demand to see Beatrice, Marcus was saying. I have legal rights. You have no rights whatsoever. Julian's voice was harsher now. And if you don't leave my property in the next 30 seconds, I will have my security guards remove you by force. You don't know who you're dealing with, Marcus threatened. My family has connections. I can destroy your business with one phone call. Interesting, said a new voice, female and firm. Beatrice recognized it as Ms. Paula Jennings, one of London's most feared lawyers. Julian must have called her. Open threats. On private property. With witnesses. Please continue. You're making our job much easier. There was a pause. Beatrice imagined Marcus's expression as he realized lawyers were present. Who are you? He asked. Paula Jennings, solicitor representing the interests of Miss Beatrice Covington Rhodes. And I have a few questions for you, Mr. Thorne. The sound of papers shuffling. Can you explain the 3 assault complaints filed against you by ex-girlfriends in the last 5 years? That's ridiculous, Marcus started. But Ms. Jennings cut him off. 2 of the complainants withdrew their claims after receiving generous financial settlements. Very convenient. And there is also the testimony of a former secretary of yours who documented aggressive and intimidating behavior in the workplace. Those women are liars looking for money. 3 different women in different contexts, reporting the same pattern of behavior. That's called character evidence, Mr. Thorne, and it will be very useful when we file for a restraining order against you. Beatrice listened, wide-eyed. Julian had really mobilized resources. He had found proof. Other victims of Marcus willing to speak. The marriage contract between our families is still valid, Marcus insisted. But Beatrice could hear the first note of uncertainty in his voice. Actually, it's not, Ms. Jennings replied. I obtained a copy of the contract. It has a specific clause regarding dissolution in cases of abusive behavior, and we have multiple witnesses and evidence of such behavior. Beatrice never filed a formal complaint because she was afraid, because your family has power and influence, because you made her believe no one would help her. Ms. Jennings's voice was sharp, but she is no longer alone. A long silence. Then Marcus spoke, and his voice was different now. Low, dangerous. Fine. You want to play it like that? We can play it like that. But Beatrice will regret this, as will all of you. Was that a threat? Ms. Jennings asked cheerfully. Because I have that on tape. More evidence for our restraining order. Heavy footsteps, then the sound of a door slamming. Beatrice waited, barely daring to breathe. Finally, Julian's voice through the safe room's intercom. He's gone. You can come down. Beatrice hesitated. Was it safe? Really? But the twins were getting restless in the small space, and she needed to see Julian, to thank him, to understand what had just happened. She went down carefully, a boy in each hand. She found Julian in the hall, talking with Miss Jennings. When he saw her, he crossed the distance between them in long strides. "Are you okay?" Beatrice nodded, unable to speak. Only then did she realize she was trembling violently. Julian guided her to the living room, where Mrs. Blackwood was already preparing tea. Miss Jennings followed them, her tablet in hand. "Miss Covington Rhodes," the lawyer began, "we got more than we expected today. Marcus Thorne has a history he has worked very hard to hide, but money talks and people talk when they have adequate protection. We have testimonies from 3 women who suffered his abuse, documentation of suspicious financial settlements, and now recordings of the threats he made today." "Is it enough?" Beatrice asked, still hardly believing it. "For a temporary restraining order?" "Absolutely. I'll file it today." Ms. Jennings looked at her with compassion. "But I need to be honest. Men like Marcus don't give up easily. The order will keep him legally away, but you will need to be careful. Very careful. She will have all the security she needs," Julian said firmly. 24 hours a day, if necessary. "And there's something else," Ms. Jennings continued. "About your father." Beatrice sat up straighter. "What about him?" "Julian asked me to discreetly investigate Edward Covington Rhodes." The lawyer paused. "Beatrice, your father is in a hospital in Edinburgh. Advanced stage pancreatic cancer. The doctors give him maybe 3 to 4 months. The world stopped. Beatrice felt as if all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. 3 to 4 months. Her father was dying. "I have to see him," she said, her voice strangled. "I have to go to him." "It's risky," Miss Jennings warned. "Marcus will probably be watching your father, waiting for you to show up." "I don't care. He's my father. He's dying, and he needs me." Julian took her hand. "Then we'll do it the right way, with proper security, with a plan." He looked at Miss Jennings. "Can you arrange that?" "I can, but it will take a few days to organize properly." Beatrice wanted to scream that she didn't have days, that every moment was precious, but she knew they were right. Going impulsively would only put everyone in danger. "A few days," she finally agreed, "but after that I'm going, no matter what." Leo climbed into her lap, sensing her anguish. "Mommy sad?" "Yes, my love. Mommy is very sad." "Hug makes it better," Lucas said, and both boys hugged her tightly. Beatrice held them, breathing in their scent, drawing strength from their innocence. They had lost their mother so young. She still had time with her father, even if it was short. She needed to be grateful for that. But when she looked at Julian and saw the understanding in his eyes, the silent promise that he would help her, Beatrice realized something that both frightened and comforted her. She was no longer alone. After 3 years of running, hiding, surviving on her own, she finally had people willing to fight by her side. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to face what was coming. 3 days passed in a feverish state of preparation. Ms. Jennings worked tirelessly to secure the restraining order against Marcus, which was officially approved by a judge. Mark coordinated a private security team for the trip to Edinburgh, and Beatrice tried to maintain some semblance of normality for the twins, even with her heart torn by the need to see her father. On Monday morning, everything was ready. Julian had insisted on accompanying her personally, leaving the management of the hotel chain in the hands of his trusted executives. Mrs. Blackwood would stay with Leo and Noah, though both had cried profusely upon learning that Mommy had to travel. "I'll be back soon, my loves," Beatrice had promised, kneeling before them. Pinky promise. "Bring a present?" Leo asked through tears. "I will. The best present I can find." Julian's private flight to Edinburgh took less than 2 hours, but to Beatrice, it felt like an eternity. She couldn't sit still, standing up, sitting down, looking out the window without really seeing the clouds below. "He'll be happy to see you," Julian said softly, sitting beside her. "He'll be angry too. 3 years without a word. He must have thought I was dead, or that I simply didn't care. He'll understand when you explain." Beatrice wasn't so sure. Her father had always been a proud man, accustomed to controlling everything around him. To find out his only daughter had fled a marriage he himself had arranged, had lived in hiding for years, that he was dying without her having tried to make contact, it would all be difficult to digest. The hospital was a modern building in the Newtown district, one of Edinburgh's most exclusive areas. Ms. Jennings met them at the entrance, accompanied by 2 security guards. "Edward Covington Rhodes is in room 312, palliative care wing. I've informed the medical staff you're coming. They are prepared to give you privacy." "Marcus?" Beatrice asked, looking around nervously. "Our men have checked. He is not in the hospital now, but he likely has someone watching. Hence the extra security." Ms. Jennings touched Beatrice's arm. "Breathe. You can do this." The walk to room 312 was the longest of Beatrice's life. Each step seemed to weigh a ton. When she finally reached the door, her hands were shaking so much that Julian had to open it for her. The room was spacious and comfortable, with large windows overlooking the city skyline, but Beatrice barely registered the details. Her eyes went straight to the figure in the bed. Edward Covington Rhodes had always been an imposing man. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a natural command, the man in the bed was a shadow of that. Thin to the point of being skeletal, his skin with the yellowish tone characteristic of advanced liver disease, tubes and monitors connected to his body. But when he opened his eyes and saw her, Beatrice immediately recognized the look. That was her father. "Beatrice?" The voice came out hoarse, incredulous. "Beatrice, is it you?" "Dad." She crossed the room in quick steps, falling to her knees beside the bed. "Dad, I'm so sorry. So sorry." The tears Beatrice had been holding back for days finally poured out. Edward raised a trembling hand and touched her face as if needing to confirm she was real. "My girl, my Beatrice." Tears streamed down his aged face. "I thought I'd never see you again. I wanted to come back sooner. I wanted to so badly. But I was afraid. Of Marcus." It wasn't a question. Edward closed his eyes for a moment. "I was a fool, a blind old fool." "Dad, no, let me speak." He opened his eyes again, and there was a clarity in them that cut Beatrice to the heart. "After you ran, it took me months to accept you weren't coming back. I was angry at first, of course, embarrassed. How could my daughter do this to me? To the company, to everything we'd built?" Beatrice bit her lip, listening. "But then," Edward continued, "I started to wonder why. Why would a daughter who had always been obedient, who had always tried to please me, run away the night before her wedding? I started asking questions, discreetly at first, then more insistently. "And you found out," Beatrice whispered. "I found out. The ex-girlfriends Marcus paid to keep quiet, the employees he intimidated, the rumors about his temper." Edward squeezed her hand. "And I understood that I had handed my daughter over to a monster for corporate greed. What kind of father does that? Dad, you didn't know. I should have known. I should have listened when you tried to tell me. I should have seen the signs." His voice broke. "I've spent the last 3 years looking for you, Beatrice. Not to bring you back to him, to ask for your forgiveness." Beatrice couldn't speak. She just held her father's hand and cried. Julian, who had remained discreetly by the door, approached. "Mr. Covington Rhodes, I'm Julian Blackwood. I'm helping your daughter." Edward looked at him with the experienced eyes of a businessman accustomed to sizing people up. "I know your name, hotel chain, good businessman, widower." His eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you to Beatrice?" The question was direct, demanding an honest answer. Julian met the man's gaze without flinching. "Someone important, to me and to my children, someone I intend to protect with every resource I have." Edward studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Good. She needs someone to protect her, especially now." He turned his attention back to Beatrice. "Has Marcus found out where you are?" "Yes. But Julian got lawyers, a restraining order, security, and we found other women he hurt willing to testify. Excellent, because I need to tell you something." Edward paused to catch his breath, the illness clearly tiring him. "When I was diagnosed 8 months ago, I knew I didn't have much time, so I took measures. I changed my will. Everything, the entire company, goes to you. Dad, you didn't have to. I had to. It's yours by right. But there's more." Edward looked at Julian. "Young man, could you give us a minute?" Julian nodded and left, closing the door gently behind him. Beatrice, Edward continued when they were alone, for the past few months I've been gathering evidence on Marcus. I hired the best investigators. I found victims he paid off, documents he hid, even some evidence of fraud in his businesses. It's all in a safe at my solicitor's office here in Edinburgh. Mr. Henry Carter. He has instructions to give everything to you. Why are you telling me this? Because Marcus won't give up. Men like him never do. But now you have the ammunition to destroy him if you need to keep him away forever. Edward coughed, and Beatrice saw pain cross his face. Promise me something. Use this evidence, show him no mercy. And when I'm gone, don't let him or his family have anything that is mine. That is yours. I promise, Dad. They talked for hours after that. Beatrice told him about the last 3 years, about the menial job she'd had, about meeting Isabella at the hospital, about the promise she had made and the twins she now loved as her own. Edward listened to everything, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, always holding her hand as if he feared she would disappear again. You've fallen in love with him, Edward said. At one point it wasn't a question. With this Julian? Beatrice felt her face flush. I haven't. It's not like that. It is. I see it in how you look at him, how you talk about him, and I see how he looks at you. Edward smiled, the first time Beatrice had seen him smile in years. It's good. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be loved by someone who values you. But what about Isabella? It would be disrespectful. Nonsense. Isabella chose you to care for her children. Do you think she didn't consider all the possibilities? That woman was smart. If she planted you in that widower's life, she probably expected exactly this. The idea left Beatrice speechless. Was it possible? Had Isabella orchestrated everything from the beginning, not just to ensure her children would be cared for, but to ensure Julian would eventually find love again? Don't waste time, Beatrice, Edward said, his voice growing weaker. I've learned the hard way that time is the one resource we truly can't buy. If he makes you happy, if you love those children, allow yourself to have that. Allow yourself to be happy. That night, Beatrice and Julian stayed at a hotel near the hospital. Julian had booked the presidential suite, but Beatrice barely noticed the luxury. She was emotionally exhausted, but also lighter than she had felt in years. Thank you, she said to Julian as they had room service dinner. For everything, for bringing me here, for staying, for... You don't have to thank me, Julian interrupted gently. I'd do it all again. My father likes you. He's an impressive man, strong, even now. Beatrice toyed with the food on her plate. He said something about me falling in love with you. Julian's fork stopped, mid-air. He looked at her intensely. And was he right? Beatrice's heart pounded. This was it, the moment of truth. She could deny it, deflect, pretend she didn't understand the question. But her father's words echoed in her mind. Don't waste time. Yes, she whispered. He was right. Julian dropped his fork, rose from his chair, and crossed the space between them. He knelt before her, taking her hands. Beatrice, from the moment my sons ran to you at that party, from the moment I found out Isabella personally chose you, from every conversation we've had, every moment I've seen, you with Leo and Noah, I knew you were special, and then I realized it wasn't just gratitude or admiration. He paused, his dark eyes locked on hers. I fell in love with the woman who honored the promise she made to my wife, with the woman who risked everything to protect children who weren't hers by blood, with the woman brave enough to flee a life of privilege because she refused to be abused. Tears streamed down Beatrice's face. Julian, I'm not asking for anything right now. I know there's a lot going on, your father, Marcus, everything. But when it all settles down, when you're ready, I'd like a chance to love you the way you deserve to be loved. Beatrice didn't answer with words. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him. Softly at first, then deeper. 3 years of loneliness and fear washed away by that single moment of true connection. When they parted, they were both crying and smiling at the same time. I take it that's a yes, Julian asked, his voice full of hope and humour. "It's a yes," Beatrice confirmed. "To a chance. To seeing where this can go. To letting something good finally happen." And as Edinburgh glittered through the suite's windows, two wounded hearts began the slow process of healing, united by the memory of a woman who loved enough to plan beyond her own life. The following days in Edinburgh developed a precious routine. Beatrice spent most of her time at the hospital with her father, talking, reminiscing, sometimes just sitting in silence while he slept. Julian stayed close, giving them privacy when needed, but always available. Edward had good days and bad days. On good days his mind was clear, and he spoke of the future, gave advice on running the pharmaceutical company, told stories about Beatrice's mother she had never heard. On bad days, the pain was so intense he could barely stay conscious, and Beatrice would just hold his hand, letting him know he wasn't alone. It was on a good day, almost a week after her arrival, that Edward asked to get to know Julian better. Beatrice left them talking while she went to get coffee, and when she returned 20 minutes later, she found the two of them laughing about something. "What did I miss?" she asked, curious. "Your father was telling me about the time you tried to do a science fair project on making perfume and ended up making the whole house smell like rotten flowers for a week," Julian said, his eyes twinkling. "I was 10, Beatrice protested, but she was smiling. "And the idea was good, I just miscalculated the proportions. Your room was off limits for a month," Edward laughed, then coughed. Laughter always led to coughing now. Beatrice offered him water, and he drank slowly. When he calmed down, he looked between the two of them with a thoughtful expression. "You're good together. You complement each other." He paused. "Julian, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course, sir." "Do you love my daughter?" The question was direct, typical of Edward. Julian didn't hesitate. "Yes, very much." "And is she ready for this? To love again, to open up after everything she's been through?" Beatrice opened her mouth to answer, but Julian spoke first, looking directly at her. "I think she is, and if she's not completely ready now, I will wait. I'll wait as long as it takes." Edward nodded, satisfied. "Good, because I'm going to ask something of you both." He took a deep breath, clearly gathering his strength. "I want you to get married, not in years, in weeks, while I'm still here to see it." "Dad," Beatrice sat up abruptly, "you can't be serious." "I am completely serious. Beatrice, you lost 3 years of your life running, hiding. You found Julian, you found those children you love. Why wait? Life is short, my daughter, shorter than we imagine. But it's so fast. People will talk, they'll say it's inappropriate. Let them talk," Edward said firmly. "Since when do you care what people say? And after I'm gone, you'll be one of the wealthiest women in Britain, heiress to a pharmaceutical empire. You need someone by your side who loves you for who you are, not for the money, someone who will protect you." Julian was quiet, watching Beatrice process her father's words. "And you?" she asked Julian. "What do you think of this?" "I think," he said carefully, "that your father is right about not wasting time. I think I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you, since I understood what you did for my sons, what you did for Isabella, but I also understand if you think it's too fast if you want to wait." "Would Isabella wait?" Edward asked suddenly. The question stopped Beatrice. "What? Isabella, the woman who orchestrated all of this, who put you in Julian's path, who prepared her sons to recognize you. Do you think she would expect you to follow social conventions about appropriate grieving periods, or would she expect you to be happy?" Beatrice thought of Isabella, of her last weeks, of how she had planned every detail, how she had told Beatrice she didn't want her sons to grow up without a mother's love, that she didn't want Julian to be alone forever. "She would give us her blessing," Beatrice whispered. "I know she would." "Then give me mine," Edward said. "Let me see my daughter happy before I go. Let me get to know these grandchildren I've been gifted." The word grandchildren made Beatrice's eyes fill with tears again. "They would love to meet you." "Then bring them here. Bring the children, Julian's mother, whoever else is important. Let's do this properly, but let's do it quickly." Julian stood and walked to the window, clearly thinking. When he turned around, there was determination in his eyes. Edward, with your permission, I would like to ask for your daughter's hand. The man in the bed smiled. Granted, but I think you should ask her too. Julian knelt beside Beatrice's chair, taking her hand. Beatrice Covington Rhodes, I know we met under unusual circumstances. I know there is still so much for us to discover about each other, but I also know with absolute certainty that you are the person I want by my side. The person I want to help raise my children. The person I want to grow old with. He paused, tears in his eyes. Marry me, not because we need to rush, but because there is no reason to wait when we know what we want. Beatrice looked at Julian, then at her father, then back at Julian. 3 years ago, she had fled a marriage that would have destroyed her. Now, she was being offered a marriage that could save her. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. Edward clapped weakly, tears streaming down his face. My girl is going to be happy. Finally going to be happy. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Mrs. Blackwood brought Leo and Noah to Edinburgh, and the meeting between the children and Edward was emotional. The twins, initially shy with the sick man in the bed, soon warmed up when he started telling funny stories about their mommy beer when she was little. Mommy made messes? Leo asked, fascinated. The biggest messes you can imagine, Edward laughed. One time she decided she was going to be an artist and painted all the white furniture in the living room with permanent marker. And what happened? Noah was engrossed in the story. Your grandmother, my wife, was so angry that Beatrice wasn't allowed to watch cartoons for a whole month. A month? Leo looked at Beatrice in horror. That's a long time. I learned my lesson, Beatrice said, laughing. It was surreal but wonderful to see her father interacting with the boys. Mr. Henry Carter, Edward's solicitor, brought the promised documents. They were devastating. Testimonies from 5 different women Marcus had assaulted, including one he had sent to the hospital. Evidence of tax fraud in his company. Recordings of conversations where he threatened people, all meticulously documented. This completely destroys him, said Miss Jennings, who reviewed everything. If we make this public, Marcus Thorne loses everything. Credibility, business, reputation, everything. Not yet, Beatrice decided. I'll keep them as insurance. If he leaves me alone, I'll leave him alone. But if he tries anything, you destroy him, Julian completed with approval. Sometimes the threat is more powerful than the action. The wedding preparations were surprisingly simple. It would be an intimate ceremony at the hospital itself, in the inner garden, with only the closest people. Edward insisted on paying for everything, and Beatrice didn't have the heart to refuse. It's the last gift I can give you, he said when she protested. Let me do this. 2 days before the ceremony, Beatrice received an unexpected call. It was Victoria. I heard you're getting married. The voice was icy. How did you know? I have my ways. I just wanted to say you've made a mistake, Eleanor, or Beatrice, or whoever you really are. Don't threaten me, Victoria. It's not a threat. It's just a warning. People like you don't belong in my world. You don't belong in high society. And eventually, Julian will realize that. He'll realize he made a mistake choosing a fugitive over someone from the elite. He didn't choose me for social status, Beatrice replied calmly. He chose me because I love his children, because I loved Isabella enough to honor a promise, and because, unlike you, I don't see those children as obstacles. Those boys will always be a reminder of Isabella, Victoria spat. They will always be a shadow over your marriage. He will never love you like he loved his first wife. You're wrong, but even if you weren't, I don't care. I don't need to be the only person Julian has ever loved. I just need to be the person he loves now and will love for the rest of our lives. There was silence on the other end, then Victoria hung up without another word. Julian found her a few minutes later, and she told him about the call. She's trying to plant doubts, he said, pulling Beatrice into his arms. It won't work. You need to know something. I loved Isabella deeply. She was my first love, my first wife, the mother of my children. I will always love her memory. Beatrice felt her stomach clench, but he continued. But that doesn't diminish what I feel for you. Love isn't a finite quantity. Isabella taught me how to love, And now I'm using everything I learned to love you, the way you deserve, with everything I have. I'm scared, Beatrice admitted, that I won't be enough, that one day you'll look at me and wish Isabella were here instead of me. Look at me, Julian held her face gently. Isabella gave me 3 happy years and 2 beautiful sons, but after she was gone, I was drowning. I couldn't be a decent father. I could barely function. You saved me. You saved my sons. You brought life back into that mansion. How could I possibly want anything else? Beatrice kissed him, pouring all her gratitude, love, and hope into that kiss. Let's get married, she whispered against his lips, and let's be happy, because Isabella would have wanted it, because my father wants it, and because we deserve it. Yes, Julian agreed. We deserve it. On the morning of the wedding, Edward was surprisingly alert and strong. The doctors had adjusted his medication to give him a few hours of clarity, even knowing it might have consequences later. It's worth it, he said when Beatrice expressed concern. To see my daughter get married, it's worth any consequence. Beatrice wore a simple white silk dress. No veil, no frills. Her father couldn't walk her to Julian, but he was there in a wheelchair, Mrs. Blackwood gently pushing it. When Beatrice entered the garden and saw Julian waiting under an arch decorated with white flowers, Leo and Noah by his side in their little suits, she felt her heart overflow. There was her family, her chance to start over, her opportunity to be happy. The ceremony was short but emotional. When it came time for the vows, both Beatrice and Julian had tear-filled eyes. I promise to love you, Julian said, to protect you, to respect you every day of my life. I promise to be the man you deserve, the father our children need, the partner who supports you in everything. I promise to honor Isabella's memory, Beatrice said, by caring for her children as if they were my own. I promise to love you with all my heart, to be strong when you need me to be, and to let you be strong for me. I promise we will deserve the second chance we've been given. When the officiant declared them husband and wife and Julian kissed, her, Leo and Noah clapped excitedly. Edward was crying openly, and Mrs. Blackwood needed several tissues. It was perfect. Simple, intimate, and absolutely perfect. Later that night, after the small celebration, Beatrice returned to her father's room alone. He was tired but smiling. Thank you, Dad, for everything, for finding me, for forgiving me this blessing. Thank you, my daughter, for giving me the chance to right my wrongs, for letting me see you happy before I go. Don't talk like that, Beatrice pleaded, though she knew it was inevitable. It's the truth, but now I can. Go in peace, knowing you are safe, loved, surrounded by people who care for you. Edward took her hand. Be happy, Beatrice. Be as happy as your mother and I were, and tell my grandchildren about me, about us, so they never forget. I promise, Beatrice said, kissing her father's forehead. I promise. The honeymoon wasn't on a tropical island or in a European city. It was in the hospital corridors, dividing time between being with Edward and learning to be a family with Julian and the twins. And somehow it was perfect because of that. Edward had 4 weeks after the wedding. 4 precious weeks where he got to know his grandsons deeply, where he saw Beatrice flourish in her role as a wife and mother, where he had long conversations with Julian about business, family, and life. Take care of her, Edward told Julian in one of these conversations. She's stronger than she looks, but also more fragile. 3 years in hiding left scars. I will spend the rest of my life making sure she knows how loved she is, Julian promised. And the children, teach them about Isabella. Don't let them forget their biological mother. Never. Isabella will always be part of our family, even if she's not physically here. Edward nodded, satisfied. In the last few weeks he had come to see Julian not just as a son-in-law, but as a son. The son he never had, the man who would protect his daughter when he no longer could. Beatrice was in the room the afternoon Edward began to decline significantly. The doctors had warned it could happen at any time, that the cancer was too advanced. Beatrice, his voice was weak but urgent. I need you to promise me something. Anything, Dad. The company, Covington Roads. Pharmaceuticals, it's yours now. But don't let it be just about business. Your grandfather founded that company to help people, to develop life-saving medicines. Don't let it become just about profits. I promise. I will honor the family's legacy. And Marcus. If he comes after you again, use the evidence without hesitation, without mercy. Protect yourself. I will. Edward closed his eyes, each breath a visible effort. Do you know what I regret most? Not meeting your mother sooner, not having more time together. She was the light of my life, just as you have always been. I know, Dad. And she knew how much you loved her. You look so much like her, not just physically, but in spirit, the kindness, the strength, the compassion. A tear rolled down his aged face. I'm sorry I wasn't the father you deserved, for putting business before your happiness. You were the best father you could be, and in the end, when it mattered most, you were here. You forgave me. You gave me your blessing. That's all I need. Edward opened his eyes one more time, focusing on her face. I love you, my Beatrice. I always have, even when I was angry, even when you were away. Always. I love you too, Dad, so much. Then everything is all right. I can rest now. And with Beatrice holding his hand, surrounded by the love he had sought in the last weeks of his life, Edward Covington Rhodes closed his eyes for the last time. The following days were a blur of arrangements, paperwork, and tears. The funeral was large, as expected for a titan of the pharmaceutical industry. Hundreds of people attended, many Beatrice didn't know, offering empty condolences. But there were also those who truly cared. Employees of the company Edward had treated well over the years, charities he had quietly supported, people whose lives had been touched by his generosity. And there was Marcus. He showed up at the wake, dressed impeccably, his expression one of false sorrow. Beatrice saw him from across the room and felt her entire body freeze. Julian immediately moved to her side, a protective, solid presence. Do you want me to get him out of here? No, Beatrice said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Let him come. I have something to say to him. Marcus crossed the room, ignoring the hostile glares from the security team. He stopped before Beatrice and Julian, his gaze sliding over her in a possessive way that made her skin crawl. Beatrice, my condolences on your loss. I don't want your condolences, Marcus. I want you to leave. Now. That's no way to treat an old friend. An ex-fiancé. Abusive ex-fiancé? Julian corrected, his voice icy. Against whom there is an active restraining order. Marcus ignored him completely, focused only on Beatrice. I see you got married. How quick. Your father was barely cold and you were already in another man's arms. Beatrice felt anger burn, but she kept her voice calm. My marriage is none of your business. Nothing about my life is your business. You lost any right to an opinion the day you first laid a hand on me. I never... Don't lie, Beatrice cut him off. I have evidence, Marcus. I have testimonies from other women you hurt. I have documentation of the fraud you committed. I have recordings of you making threats. My father spent his last months gathering all of it. For the first time, she saw uncertainty cross Marcus's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Beatrice took a step forward, and it was satisfying to see Marcus flinch slightly. Do you want to test me? Do you want me to make it all public? Because I can. I can destroy your reputation, your business, everything you have, with one phone call. Then why haven't you done it already? Because I wanted to give you one chance, a single chance to leave me alone, to accept that it's over, that I've moved on, that you will never have power over me again. Marcus looked between Beatrice and Julian, calculating. And if I accept, if I leave you alone, then the evidence stays locked away. You go on with your life, I go on with mine. We never see or speak to each other again. And if I don't accept? Then tomorrow, every newspaper in the country will have a full copy of everything. Every one of your victims will have legal support to sue you. Every fraud will be exposed. You will lose everything. Beatrice paused. The choice is yours, Marcus. You can walk out of here now and keep at least your freedom and some shred of your reputation. Or You can continue your obsession and lose absolutely everything." The silence that followed was tense. Marcus looked at Beatrice as if seeing her for the first time. The scared girl who had run away 3 years ago was gone. In her place stood a strong, protected woman, armed with evidence and determination. "You've changed," he said finally. "Yes, I have. I've grown up. I've shed the fear you planted in me." Beatrice lifted her chin. "So? What's it going to be?" Marcus looked at Julian, at the security guards watching nearby, back at Beatrice. And for the first time in his life, he seemed to calculate that he had lost. "Fine," he said, his voice low. "You win, I'll leave you alone. I want that in writing, a legal document stating you renounce any claim on me or on the arranged marriage between our families. I'll have my solicitor prepare it. Ms. Jennings will review it before I sign anything. And Marcus?" Beatrice waited until he looked at her. "If I find out you're following me, that you've hired investigators, that you're trying anything, the evidence goes public immediately. No warnings, no second chances." Marcus gave a stiff nod and walked away, his back straight but his defeat clear. Julian pulled Beatrice into his arms as soon as he was out of sight. "You were incredible." "I was trembling inside," she admitted. "No one could tell. You were strong, firm, powerful. Edward would have been proud." The tears Beatrice had been holding back finally fell. "He gave me the weapons to free myself. The company, the evidence, everything. It was his last gift. And you used it perfectly. Marcus knows he lost. Men like him only understand power, and you just showed him you have more of it than he does." Mrs. Blackwood appeared, the twins each holding one of her hands. "Has that man gone?" "He's gone, and he's not coming back," Beatrice said, kneeling to hug Leo and Noah. "Never again." "Mommy sad?" Leo asked, touching her tears. "A little sad, a little happy. It's complicated, my love." "Hug makes it better," Lucas declared, and both boys hugged her tight. Beatrice laughed through her tears. Yes, a hug always makes it better. In the following weeks, Beatrice began the process of taking over Covington Road's pharmaceuticals. It was daunting at first, the enormity of the responsibility weighing on her, but she had excellent executives who had worked with her, father for years, and Mr. Carter to guide her through the legal aspects. "Your father left everything in perfect order," the solicitor explained. "He knew you would eventually take over, so he prepared everything meticulously." Beatrice also initiated changes. She implemented employee assistance programs, increased investment in research for rare diseases that weren't profitable but were important, and established a charitable fund in Edward's name to provide free medication to underserved communities. "You're making your father proud," Julian said one evening, as they reviewed documents together in the study of their London mansion. "I hope so. I'm trying to honor what he built while also doing better." Life settled into a new normal. Leo and Noah flourished, their unique personalities emerging now that they were no longer trapped in trauma. Leo was the thoughtful one, asking 1,000 questions about everything. Noah was the adventurer, always wanting to explore and try new things. And they both loved Beatrice with an intensity that sometimes took her breath away. "Mommy Bea," they started calling her, distinguishing her from Mommy Isabella when they talked about photos and stories. "Does that bother you?" Julian asked one night after the boys were in bed. "Them differentiating between you and Isabella?" "No," Beatrice said honestly. "Isabella will always be their mother. I don't want to erase her. I just want to add love, not replace it." She would have loved that. Loved you. Julian pulled Beatrice into his arms. "Sometimes I feel like she's smiling down from somewhere, seeing how it all worked out." "I feel that too," Beatrice admitted, like she was orchestrating everything from the start. It was 2 weeks later that they heard news about Victoria. She had tried to marry another wealthy businessman, but the engagement had been broken off when stories about her manipulative and mercenary nature began to circulate in elite circles. Apparently, several people from the party were so disgusted with how she acted that they started spreading the truth, Mrs. Blackwood reported over dinner, about how she manipulated Julian, how she treated the children, how she tried to destroy Eleanor or Beatrice. "Karma," Julian said simply. Beatrice felt no satisfaction at Victoria's downfall, only relief that she was no longer a threat. I hope she finds peace eventually, that she learns to be a better person. You're too good, Mrs. Blackwood said, shaking her head. After everything she did. Holding on to anger would only hurt me. I've spent too many years in fear and anger. I want to move forward. And she did. 3 months after Edward's passing, Beatrice finally felt she had found her footing. She ran the company with growing confidence, was a loving mother to Leo and Noah, and a devoted wife to Julian. It was then that she discovered she was pregnant. Beatrice stared at the pregnancy test in her hands, her heart beating so loudly she could hear it. 2 faint pink lines, unmistakable. She was pregnant. She sat down on the edge of the bathtub, trying to process the information. A baby. She and Julian were going to have a baby. The twins would have a brother or a sister. The first emotion was pure joy, a happiness that made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. But fear quickly followed. Would she be a good biological mother when she was already a stepmother? How would the twins react? Would she be able to love this baby and Leo and Noah equally? Beatrice? Julian's voice from the other side of the door. Is everything okay in there? She opened. The door, the test still in her hand. She said nothing, just showed it to him. Julian looked at the test, then at her, then back at the test. His face went through a series of expressions so quickly Beatrice could barely keep up. Shock, disbelief, and then a joy so pure it lit up his eyes. We're having a baby, his voice came out hoarse with emotion. We're having a baby, Beatrice confirmed, and then she was in his arms, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. When? How? I mean, I know how, Julian laughed, as he spoke. But when did it happen? It must have been about 6 weeks ago, I think. I need to make an appointment with an obstetrician to confirm. Julian held her at arm's length, looking at her with such tenderness that Beatrice felt fresh tears. How are you feeling? Scared? Happy? Both. Everything. Jules, I don't know if I know how to be a mother to a baby. With Leo and Noah, they were already 2 when I met them. But a newborn. We'll learn together. And it will be different this time. I won't be alone, drowning in work and grief. We'll be together. What if I'm not good at it? Impossible. You're an incredible mother to the twins. You'll be an incredible mother to this baby too. They told Mrs. Blackwood first, who cried with joy. Another grandchild. Oh, Edward would be so happy, so happy. Do you think we should tell the boys now? Beatrice asked. Or wait until we're absolutely sure? Tell them now, Mrs. Blackwood advised. They deserve to know, and it will give them time to adjust to the idea. So that evening, after dinner, Beatrice and Julian sat down with Leo and Noah in the living room. Boys, we have some news to tell you, Julian began. Are we going to the park? Lucas asked hopefully. Better than that, Beatrice said, smiling. You're going to be big brothers. Mommy B is going to have a baby. Leo and Noah looked at each other, processing. Then Leo asked, a baby like we were? Exactly. A tiny baby who will need lots of love and care, and will need you two to teach them everything you know. Will it be able to play with us? Lucas asked. Not right away, Julian explained. Babies are very small at first, but as they grow, yes, you'll be able to play together. Is it a boy or a girl? Leo wanted to know. We don't know yet. It's going to be a surprise. The twins seemed to consider this. Then Lucas asked the question Beatrice had been dreading. Did our other mommy have a baby in her tummy too? Beatrice looked at Julian, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, love. Mommy Isabella had you two in her tummy. She loved you both very, very much, even before you were born. And will you love the baby in your tummy? Asked Leo, ever the thoughtful one. I will love it so much, just like I love you two very, very much. But we weren't in your tummy, Leo observed. No, you were in Mommy Isabella's tummy. But you know what? I don't need to have carried you in my tummy to love you. I love you with all my heart, just as much as I will love this baby. Love doesn't just come from the tummy. It comes from the heart. Leo came closer, and placed his hand on Beatrice's still flat stomach. "Hi, baby. I'm your brother, Leo. I'm going to take care of you." Noah did the same. "And I'm Noah. We'll teach you everything." Beatrice looked at Julian with tears in her eyes and saw he was equally moved. In that moment, she felt any residual fear melt away. They were going to be okay. They were going to be a beautiful, happy family. The following months were a time of transformation. Beatrice's belly grew, and with it grew the excitement in the house. Leo and Noah were fascinated, always wanting to touch her belly, talk to the baby and ask endless questions. "Why does the baby kick? Can the baby hear me? Does the baby like ice cream too?" Beatrice answered every question with patience, including them in every step. She took them to ultrasounds when the doctor allowed, let them help decorate the nursery, and read books about being a big brother with them every night. In the 5th month, they found out it would be a girl. Julian cried when the doctor revealed it, his emotion overflowing. "A daughter," he whispered, amazed. "We're going to have a daughter." "What are we going to name her?" Beatrice asked that night. Julian was quiet for a long moment. "I know it's a lot to ask. I know it might seem strange, but I would like to name her Isabella, in honor of the woman who brought us together." Beatrice felt tears fill her eyes. She had thought of it herself, but had been afraid to suggest it, worried Julian might find it inappropriate, or that she was trying to replace something. "I would love that," she said. "Isabella deserves to be remembered, celebrated, and our daughter will grow up knowing about the incredible woman whose name she carries." "Isabella Beatrice Blackwood," Julian said, testing the name. "Perfect." As the pregnancy progressed, Beatrice also worked to consolidate changes at Covington Road's Pharmaceuticals. She established an internship program for young people from disadvantaged communities, created partnerships with universities for research, and initiated the development of drugs for neglected diseases. "Your father built an empire," Mr. Carter said during a meeting, "but you are building a legacy." There was resistance from some older executives, accustomed to the old ways of doing business, but Beatrice held firm, using the same determination she had used to face Marcus. "This company will be about more than just profits," she declared at a board meeting. "It will be about making a real difference in people's lives. If you cannot align with that vision, there's the door." No executive left. Eventually, everyone adjusted to the new leadership. It was in her 7th month of pregnancy that Beatrice finally visited her father's grave for the first time since the funeral. Julian accompanied her, as did the twins. The grave was simple but elegant, exactly as Edward would have wanted. Beatrice knelt before it, one hand on her prominent belly. "Hi, Dad," she began, her voice trembling. "I brought your family to meet you. Well, to visit, at least." She paused, wiping away tears. "I'm pregnant, with a girl. We're going to name her Isabella, in honor of the woman who changed our lives." Leo and Noah placed flowers they had picked, small white daisies. "Grandpa," Leo said solemnly, "Mommy says you were really cool. I wish I had known you better." "Me too," Noah agreed. "But Mommy tells stories about you. Good stories." Beatrice hugged the boys, her heart so full it felt like it would burst. "Your grandfather loved you so much, and he would be so proud of you." Julian placed a hand on her shoulder. "He is proud of all of you." That night, back at the mansion, Beatrice dreamed of Isabella for the first time in months. In the dream, Isabella was sitting in the mansion's garden, smiling. "You did well," Isabella said. "Better than I could have ever hoped." "I'm sorry," Beatrice said in the dream, "for taking your place, for loving your husband, for—" "Nonsense," Isabella laughed. "You didn't take my place. You created your own. You loved my children when they needed it most. You loved my husband when he was lost. You kept every promise you made to me. I'm naming our daughter after you." "I know, and I'm honored." Isabella stood up, approaching her. "Beatrice, you need to stop feeling guilty. You didn't steal anything from me. I gave it all as a gift. I gave you my family because I knew you would love them. Because I knew Julian would need someone like you. You planned it all, didn't you? Isabella smiled mysteriously. I planned what I could. The rest was fate. And you two did your part, by opening your hearts, by risking to love again. I wish you were still here. I am. Not in the way I was, but I'm in every laugh from Leo and Noah. I'm in the pictures you show them. I'm in the stories you tell. I'm in the love you feel for them. Isabella touched Beatrice's face gently. And now, I'll be in little Isabella too. My legacy continues through you. Beatrice woke up with tears on her face, but smiling. Julian woke up too, immediately concerned. Are you okay? The baby. Everything is perfect, Beatrice said. I just had the most beautiful dream, with Isabella. She told him about the dream, and Julian held her close. She was right, you know. About everything. You didn't steal anything. You gave love, you gave care, you gave hope. We gave, Beatrice corrected. Together. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose. You gave me love when I thought I could never trust anyone again. Then we're partners. In everything. In everything, Beatrice agreed. 2 weeks later, at 8.5 months pregnant, Beatrice finally closed the last chapter of her past. The legal document arrived in the post, signed by Marcus and notarized, officially renouncing any claim on her or the arranged marriage. Ms. Jennings reviewed it meticulously. It's perfect, legally sound. You are completely free. Free. Beatrice held the document, feeling the weight of 3 years of fear finally lift from her shoulders. Free to live, to love, to be who she truly was. Shall I burn the evidence against him? Ms. Jennings asked. Beatrice considered. No, I'll keep it. Not as a threat, but as a reminder. A reminder that I survived, that I won, that I will never again let anyone have that kind of power over me. Wise decision, Ms. Jennings approved, and then, as if the universe had been waiting for her to close that final chapter, Beatrice went into labor that very night. It was time for Isabella Beatrice Blackwood to enter the world. The contractions started softly, almost unnoticeably, as Beatrice was putting the twins to bed. She had read all the books, watched all the videos, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of the moment. "Jules," she called, trying to keep her voice calm so as not to frighten Leo and Noah. "I think it's time." Julian entered the children's room so quickly he nearly tripped. "Now? Already?" "The contractions are still spaced out, but yes, I think it's starting." Mrs. Blackwood took command with the efficiency of someone who had been through this before. "I'll stay with the boys. You go to the hospital. I've already called Dr. Santos. He's waiting for you." The drive to the hospital was surreal. Julian drove with excessive care, stopping completely at every speed bump, making Beatrice laugh between contractions. "I'm not going to brake, love. You can drive normally. I just want to make sure you and the baby arrive safely." At the hospital, they were immediately taken to a private suite. Dr. Santos, the obstetrician who had followed her entire pregnancy, examined Beatrice and smiled. "You're progressing well, but you still have a few hours ahead of you. Try to relax, walk a bit, do whatever feels comfortable." The next few hours were a mix of pain, anticipation, and love. Julian never left Beatrice's side, holding her hand, wiping her face with a cool cloth, whispering words of encouragement. "You're doing so well. So well." "It hurts more than I expected," Beatrice admitted between contractions. "Do you want an epidural? I can call the anesthetist." "Not yet. I want to try a little longer without." But as the hours passed and the pain intensified, Beatrice accepted the epidural. The relief was immense, allowing her to truly rest between contractions. "Better?" Julian asked, stroking her hair. "Much better. Now I can think clearly." "What are you thinking about?" "About how we got here. A year ago I was in hiding, alone, scared. And now I'm here, about to have our daughter, surrounded by love." Beatrice squeezed his hand. "It's a miracle." "You're the miracle," Julian said, kissing her forehead. "You came into our lives and brought the light back." At 3 in the morning, Dr. Santos announced it was time. Beatrice sat up straighter in bed, her heart racing with anticipation and nervousness. "Ready?" the doctor asked. "Ready," Beatrice confirmed, gripping Julian's hand tightly. The delivery was intense, but Beatrice focused on Julian's voice, the doctor's instructions, the promise of holding her daughter in her arms very soon. And then, at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in November, Isabella Beatrice Blackwood entered the world with a strong, healthy cry. "She's a perfect little girl," Dr. Santos announced, placing the baby on Beatrice's chest. Beatrice looked at her tiny daughter, her dark hair wet, her face red from crying, and felt a love so intense it hurt. "Hi, my little Isabella. Mommy's here, Daddy's here, you are so loved." Julian was crying openly, touching his daughter's head with reverence. "She's perfect. Absolutely perfect." "She weighs 7 pounds and 11 ounces, the nurse informed them, 20 inches long, completely healthy. Beatrice breastfed for the first time right there, the sensation strange but wonderful. Isabella latched on immediately, suckling with determination. "She's strong," the nurse observed with approval, "like her mother." After a few hours of recovery, visitors were allowed. Mrs. Blackwood was the first, bringing Leo and Noah. The twins, now 3, entered the room cautiously, their eyes wide. "She's so small," Leo whispered, amazed. "Can I touch her?" Noah asked. "Of course," Beatrice said. "Come meet your little sister." The boys came closer, and Beatrice guided their small hands to gently touch Isabella's head. The baby opened her eyes, looking unfocused at her brothers. "Hi, Isabella," Leo said softly. "I'm your brother Leo. I promise to take care of you forever. And I'm Noah. We'll play together when you grow up." Beatrice looked at Julian, seeing the same emotion reflected in his eyes. Her family was complete, not in a conventional way, not following traditional paths, but complete nonetheless. In the following days at the hospital, Beatrice learned the rhythms of a newborn. The frequent feedings, the constant nappy changes, the cries she couldn't immediately decipher. But she had Julian by her side, always ready to help, to hold the baby while she rested, to bring her food and water. "You're a natural," Beatrice observed, watching him rock Isabella. "It's different this time. With Leo and Noah, I was so lost in grief I could barely function. Isabella always did everything, I just showed up occasionally." He looked down at his daughter in his arms. "But now I can really be present, really enjoy every moment." When they finally went home, Leo and Noah were thrilled. They had helped Mrs. Blackwood decorate the house with balloons and welcome banners. "For baby Isabella," they announced proudly. Establishing a routine with 3 children, 1 a newborn, was challenging. But Beatrice and Julian worked as a team, sharing responsibilities, supporting each other when they were exhausted. Leo and Noah were wonderful brothers. They helped fetch nappies, sang to the baby when she cried, and immediately alerted them if they noticed anything different. "Mommy, Isabella did a poo," Noah would announce, as if it were the most important news in the world. "Isabella is awake," Leo would run to inform them every time his little sister opened her eyes. Beatrice watched it all with a full heart. These children, who had once been silent and traumatized, were now vibrant, happy, loving. And Isabella was growing up surrounded by so much love, she would never know what it was to feel alone. 3 months after Isabella's birth, Beatrice finally felt she was finding a balance between being a mother, a wife, and a CEO. She had returned to work, but on a reduced schedule, holding many meetings virtually. The company was thriving under her leadership. The new programs she had implemented were generating positive results, not just financially, but in social impact. Business magazine articles featured her as the new generation of corporate leaders, those who understood that success went beyond numbers on a balance sheet. "Edward would be so proud," Mrs. Blackwood said one afternoon, as they had tea in the garden watching the children play. Isabella slept peacefully in her pram, while Leo and Noah built sandcastles. "I hope so. I try to honor what he built while also modernizing, humanizing. You're doing more than that. You're turning that company into something that truly makes a difference." Mrs. Blackwood paused. "And Isabella, the first Isabella, do you think she would approve?" Beatrice looked at her sleeping daughter, so peaceful, so loved. Yes. I think she planned this exact thing. She knew Julian would need to love again, that the boys would need a present mother. She orchestrated everything to give us all a second chance at happiness. She was special like that, always thinking of everyone before herself. That's why we honor her, why our daughter carries her name, why we tell stories about her to the boys every day. Isabella is part of this family, even if she's not physically here. That night, Beatrice and Julian finally had a few moments alone after putting all 3 children to bed. They sat on the terrace looking at the stars in comfortable silence. "Happy?" Julian asked eventually. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Beatrice answered honestly. "A year ago, I was on the run, hiding, alone. Now I have a beautiful family, a company that makes a real difference, a purpose." "No. Regrets?" "None. Every hardship, every moment of fear, every sacrifice was worth it to get here." She turned to face him. "And you? Any regrets?" "Only one," Julian said, and Beatrice's heart clenched until he continued. "I wish I had met you sooner. I wish we could have had more years together." Beatrice relaxed, smiling. "But then we wouldn't be the people we are now. I wouldn't have learned to be strong. You wouldn't have learned to value every moment. We came to each other exactly when we were ready, always so wise. Not wise, just grateful. Grateful for every moment we have." Julian pulled her into his arms, and they stayed like that for a long time. 2 survivors who had found each other, 2 wounded souls who had healed together, 2 hearts that had learned to love again. Inside the house, Leo woke up thirsty and walked quietly to Isabella's room. He found Noah already there, looking down at his sleeping baby sister. "Can't sleep either," Leo whispered. "Just wanted to see if she was okay," Noah said. The 2 brothers stood there for a moment, watching the baby breathe softly. "We're lucky, aren't we?" Leo said eventually. "We have 2 mommies who love us. Mommy Isabella, who's in heaven, and Mommy B, who's here. And now we have baby Isabella too," Noah added. "It's like Mommy Isabella came back, but different. Daddy says we'll take care of her together. Be the best big brothers." "We will," Noah agreed. "We'll protect her, like Mommy B protects us." The 2 went back to their beds, not realizing Mrs. Blackwood had been watching them from the doorway, wiping away tears of emotion. This family, formed by love and promises, by second chances and determination, was complete. And it was. Perfect precisely because it wasn't perfect, because it had been built from broken pieces that fit together in unexpected but beautiful ways. 5 years later, the mansion in Kensington Gardens was filled with life and laughter. It was a Saturday morning, and the family breakfast was the usual wonderful chaos. Leo and Noah, now 8, were excitedly arguing about which football team was better while devouring pancakes. Isabella, aged 5, was trying to convince her father that she definitely needed a puppy, listing elaborate reasons with the seriousness of a lawyer. "And I'll walk him every day and give him baths and clean up his poo and teach him tricks," the little girl with dark hair and expressive eyes argued passionately. "That's what you said about the goldfish," Julian pointed out with amusement. "And guess who feeds the fish every day?" "But a dog is different. A fish can't play." Beatrice watched it all with a smile, one hand resting on her belly. She was pregnant again, this time with twins, boys. The ultrasound had revealed it the week before, and the whole family was ecstatic. 2 more brothers, Isabella had jumped for joy. "I'll have to teach them so. Much." "We'll all teach them," Leo had corrected, ever the responsible one. "Will they be as naughty as you 2 were?" Noah had asked with a mischievous grin. Now, watching her family around the table, Beatrice felt a gratitude so deep it almost hurt. How her life had changed in just a few years, from a frightened fugitive to a confident CEO, from a woman alone to a mother of 5, from someone who barely dared to dream of happiness to someone who lived it every day. Covington Road's Pharmaceuticals had become a national benchmark, not only for product quality, but for social responsibility. The programs Beatrice had implemented had saved lives, provided opportunities, and changed entire communities. "Mommy," Isabella tugged her sleeve, Can I tell the babies in your tummy about Mommy Isabella in heaven? Of course you can, my love. Isabella placed her little hands on Beatrice's belly and began to speak, her voice serious. Hi, babies. I'm your sister Isabella. I'm named after a very special woman who was Leo and Noah's mommy before. She's in heaven now, but she loves you very much even from there, and she helped our mommy and daddy find each other. Beatrice exchanged emotional glances with Julian. They had been very open about the family's history, about the first Isabella, about how they had all come to one another. The children had grown up knowing the truth, and it had made everything stronger, not more complicated. When you're born, Isabella continued, I'll show you the pictures of Mommy Isabella. She was very pretty and very nice, and I'll tell you all the stories I know about her. Leo and Noah came closer too, placing their hands on the belly. We'll teach you how to play football, Noah promised, and how to read, Leo added, and to be kind and brave. Mrs. Blackwood entered the kitchen at that moment, now 76 but still vibrant. What a beautiful scene, my whole family together. Grandma! Isabella ran to hug her. I was telling the babies about the other Mommy Isabella. How wonderful. She would be so happy knowing she's remembered with so much love. Beatrice's phone rang. It was Ms. Jennings, now not just a solicitor but a close family friend. Beatrice, I have news. That evidence about Marcus you kept. 3 women have come forward in the last few weeks, encouraged by the anti-abuse movement. They all have similar stories. They want to press charges, and they want to know if you still have the documentation your father compiled. Beatrice stepped away from the table for privacy. I do. It's all stored safely. They would like to use it, not for financial gain, but to ensure Marcus is held accountable, so he can't do this to anyone else. Beatrice thought of the scared young woman she had been, the woman who had fled the night before her wedding. She thought of all the other women Marcus had hurt. Yes, tell them they have my full cooperation. I will provide everything I have, testify if necessary. It's time for Marcus to pay for what he did. Are you sure? It will bring media attention, questions. I'm sure. I'm not afraid of him anymore. And if my story can help other women find courage, then it's worth it. When she returned to the table, Julian read the change on her face. Everything okay? Better than okay. I'm finally going to make Marcus answer for his crimes, not just for me, but for all the others he hurt. Julian took her hand in support. I'll be by your side, through everything. I know. That's why I'm not afraid. Later that day, with the children playing in the garden under Mrs. Blackwood's supervision, Beatrice and Julian walked to the small memorial garden they had created at the back of the property. It had 2 benches surrounded by flowers. One was in memory of Edward, the other of Isabella. They sat on Isabella's bench, holding hands, watching their children play. Sometimes I feel like she's here, Beatrice said. Especially when I'm with the children, I see something Leo or Noah does and I think, that came from Isabella. She lives on through them. And through our little girl too, Julian added. Baby Isabella has so much of the personality described in the stories, the determination, the joy, the kindness. Do you still miss her? Beatrice asked. It was a question she asked occasionally, needing to know, needing reassurance. I always will. She was an important part of my life. Julian turned to Beatrice. But my love for you isn't less because of it. It's different, but not less. Isabella taught me how to love, and you taught me how to love again after I thought I never could. We're lucky, Beatrice said. So lucky to have had second chances when so many don't even get a first. So let's honor that. Let's live fully, love completely, and not waste a single day. Promise, Beatrice agreed. In the following months, the case against Marcus unfolded publicly. The evidence Edward had compiled, combined with the testimonies of 5 different women, was devastating. Marcus was convicted not only of assault, but of tax fraud, witness intimidation, and a host of other crimes. He lost everything. The company, his reputation, his freedom. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison, and the Thorn company went bankrupt. Beatrice felt no satisfaction at his downfall, only relief. Relief that he couldn't hurt anyone else. Relief that other women had found the courage to speak out. relief that that chapter was finally, definitively, closed. As for Victoria, her social fall was more subtle but just as complete. After several failed attempts to marry into the elite, she had eventually left London, moving abroad. Occasionally, pictures of her would appear on social media, always trying to project a glamorous life. But those who knew her saw the bitterness behind the forced smiles. "Karma is real," Mrs. Blackwood commented when they saw a news item about her. "It's sad," Beatrice said. "She had so much potential, so much she could have done with her life, but she chose manipulation and greed." "Some people never learn," Mrs. Blackwood sighed. But the Blackwood family didn't waste energy thinking about the negative past. They were too busy building a bright future. The new twins were born on a sunny spring afternoon. Daniel and Philip were healthy, noisy boys who immediately captured everyone's hearts. Leo, Noah, and Isabella embraced them as the best thing that had ever happened. "Now there are 5. Of us," Isabella announced proudly to anyone who would listen. 5 siblings, it's the best." Seeing Julian with 5 children, all loved equally, all receiving attention and affection, made Beatrice's heart overflow. He was the father he was always meant to be, present, involved, loving. And Beatrice discovered that loving 5 children didn't divide her heart into 5 pieces. It multiplied it. Each child was different, special, loved completely. One afternoon, years after the younger twins' birth, Beatrice was in her home office when she found an old box in the back of a cupboard. Inside was the cleaner's uniform she had worn at that hospital years ago, where she had met Isabella. She held the uniform, feeling the weight of the memories. That scared young woman, working night shifts under a false identity, could never have imagined where she would be years later. Julian found her there, holding the uniform, tears streaming down her face. "Hey, what's wrong?" "I was just thinking about how everything changed, about how one decision to run away, to be brave for a moment, led to all of this. To you, the children, the life we have. Your courage gave us this family," Julian said, sitting beside her. "Your courage to flee from Marcus, to accept Isabella's request, to take a chance on love again." "Our courage," Beatrice corrected. "You were brave too, in trusting me with your children, in loving again after Isabella, in standing up to Marcus for me. So we're 2 survivors who built something beautiful from the ashes of our pain." Beatrice looked out the window, seeing their 5 children playing in the garden. Leo and Noah, now teenagers, were patiently teaching Daniel and Philip how to kick a ball. Isabella ran between them, her laughter echoing through the air. "Isabella would be happy," Beatrice said. "With all of this, with how her children have grown up happy and loved, with how we found each other, with how we've honored her memory while building our future." "She planned it all," Julian agreed. "From that first day in the hospital, when she showed the babies your picture, she knew you were special, that you would be perfect for us. I'm grateful to her every day, for trusting me, for giving me this gift." That night, with all 5 children finally asleep, Beatrice and Julian sat on the terrace just as they had countless times over the years. The sky was clear, the stars shining brightly. "See that star there?" Julian pointed to a particularly bright one. "That's Isabella, watching over us. And that one there," Beatrice pointed to another, "is my father, together guiding us. Together smiling because we made it, because we honored their memories by building something beautiful." Beatrice rested her head on Julian's shoulder, feeling a deep and complete peace. "We're happy, aren't we?" "Immensely. I wake up grateful every single day, grateful for you, for the children, for this life we've built." "Me too. Every day is a gift." And it was. Every day, with its joys and challenges, its moments of chaos and moments of peace, was precious. It was the life they had fought for, that they had built stone by stone from promises made and honored. The story had begun with a promise whispered in a hospital room, a promise between 2 women who barely knew each other, but who recognized kindred spirits, a promise to protect, to love, to honor. And that promise had transformed into a family. Unconventional, non-traditional but perfect in its imperfection. A family built on love, trust, and second chances. Isabella in heaven looked down, her spirit content. She had done the impossible, planned beyond her own life, ensured that those she loved would be cared for. And they were not just cared for, they flourished. Edward looked on too, proud of his daughter who had turned pain into purpose, fear into courage, flight into a triumphant return. And down below, in the mansion in Kensington Gardens, a family slept peacefully, secure in their love for one another, grateful for the journeys that had brought them together. True motherly love had transcended biology, just as it should. Promises, made to those who had passed on, had united destined souls, just as the universe had planned. And genuine kindness had triumphed over manipulation and selfishness, just as it always should. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Beatrice, Julian, Isabella, and this entire extraordinary family has touched your hearts. Stories like this remind us that second chances exist, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that kept promises can change entire destinies. If this narrative resonated with you, if you felt something while following this journey of pain, transformed into joy, we invite you to leave a like on this video and subscribe to our channel. Share in the comments which moment moved you the most, whether you believe in second chances, or if you've experienced situations where promises changed everything. Your story matters too. Every day, we bring unique narratives that explore love, family, overcoming adversity, and the incredible human capacity to start anew. Don't miss our upcoming content. For more stories that will stir your heart and make you reflect on life's twists and turns, click here on the side and discover our special playlist. Each story is a window into different aspects of the human experience. We look forward to seeing you in the comments and in the next video. See you soon.